In the dust-choked town of Willow Creek, hope died a little more each day that passed. For Eliza Montgomery, it had all but withered completely as she stared at the empty pantry, the hollow eyes of her 3 children reflected in the tarnished handle of the cupboard door. 6 months since typhoid took her husband James, leaving behind nothing but debts and hungry mouths to feed. The bank was coming for the farm tomorrow. The undertaker had been paid with her wedding ring. Her children hadn't eaten a proper meal in days. Perhaps, Eliza thought as she gripped the edge of the sink until her knuckles turned white, this was what it meant to reach the end of your rope. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Mama, I'm hungry, whispered 5-year-old Sarah, her blonde curls limp around a face grown too thin. Beside her, 7-year-old Thomas clutched the family Bible as if salvation might fall from between its pages if he held it tight enough. 10-year-old William, trying so hard to be the man of the house, stood at the window watching for miracles that never came. "I know, darling," Eliza said, forcing brightness into her voice while grief and desperation clawed at her throat. "We'll have something soon." The lie tasted bitter on her tongue. A sharp knock at the door made them all jump. William's hand instinctively reached for his father's old rifle, propped in the corner, empty of ammunition, but still a comfort. "Stay here," Eliza whispered, smoothing her threadbare dress before opening the door to face whatever new misfortune had come calling. The silhouette against the setting sun belonged to a man both familiar and strange. Wyatt Blackwood, owner of the largest cattle ranch in the territory. His shadow stretched across her porch like the reach of his influence stretched across the county. Dark eyes surveyed her from beneath the brim of an expensive hat. His face, weathered by sun and hardship, despite his 35 years. "Mrs. Montgomery," he said, removing his hat. "May I come in?" Eliza hesitated. Blackwood had been her husband's rival, their properties sharing a contested boundary and a bitter history. James had blamed Wyatt for blocking access to the creek during last year's drought, causing their first failed crop. The argument had nearly come to blows at the general store the month before James fell ill. "Mr. Blackwood, this isn't a good time," she said, trying to block his view of the empty home behind her. "I suspect there hasn't been a good time in your house for months," he replied, his voice neither kind nor cruel, simply matter of fact. "That's why I'm here." Against her better judgment, Eliza stepped aside. The children shrank back as Wyatt ducked to enter the small farmhouse, his presence filling the modest room. He nodded at the children, then turned his attention back to Eliza. "I'll be direct, Mrs. Montgomery. I know the bank is foreclosing tomorrow. I know your situation." Heat flushed Eliza's cheeks. Shame burned hotter than the anger. "Have you come to gloat, to buy our land for pennies once the bank takes it?" Something flashed in Wyatt's eyes. Not anger, but something harder to define. "No, ma'am. I've come with a proposal." William stepped forward, shoulders squared despite his small frame. "We don't need your charity, Mr. Blackwood." Wyatt's mouth twitched, almost a smile. "Good thing I'm not offering any, son." He turned back to Eliza. "What I'm offering is a business arrangement, a marriage." The room went silent. Even little Sarah, too young to fully understand, sensed the weight of the moment. "That's absurd," Eliza whispered, her hand finding the doorframe for support. "Is it?" Wyatt challenged. "You need security for your children. You're about to lose everything. I need—" He paused, choosing his words carefully. "I need a wife to satisfy the terms of my father's will. He left conditions that I must be married by my 36th birthday to maintain full ownership of the Blackwood Ranch. That's 3 months from now." Eliza stared, disbelief warring with the first dangerous flicker of hope. "You can't be serious. I've never been more serious. This is a practical solution for both of us." His eyes swept the barren kitchen, the children's gaunt faces. "Your husband and I had our differences, but I respected him. I won't see his family starve when I have the means to prevent it. And what would this arrangement entail?" Eliza asked, her voice barely audible. "You and your children would move to my ranch. You'd have my name, my protection, food on your table. Your children would want for nothing. You would manage the household as my wife. And what would you expect in return?" The question hung in the air between them, heavy with implication. Wyatt met her gaze steadily. "Respect, loyalty, a convincing appearance as my wife in public." His jaw tightened. "Nothing more, unless you wish it." William stepped closer to his mother, protective even in his youth. "Why us? Why my ma?" Wyatt considered the boy. "Because she's respectable. Because people in town already know she's in trouble and won't question why she'd accept such an offer. Because—" He stopped himself, something vulnerable flashing across his face before disappearing behind his stoic expression. "I'll give you until morning to decide," Wyatt said, placing his hat back on his head. "The bank arrives at noon. I'll return at 10. He reached into his pocket and placed a small pouch on the table. The unmistakable clink of coins echoed in the silent room. "That should help with tonight, regardless of your decision." Without waiting for a response, he turned and walked out, closing the door softly behind him. Through the window, Eliza watched him mount his horse, a magnificent black stallion that seemed as imposing as its master, and ride away, dust swirling in his wake. Thomas approached the table, eyeing the pouch. "Is that money, Mama?" Eliza didn't move, her mind racing with the impossible choice before her. Marriage to a man her husband had despised, a business arrangement in place of love, trading her independence for security. "What are we going to do?" William asked, his young voice heavy with a burden no child should bear. The last light of day filtered through the window, illuminating the faces of her children, James's children, their futures hanging on her decision. Outside, the vast Wyoming territory stretched toward the horizon, beautiful and merciless, caring nothing for the struggles of a widow and her children. "First," Eliza said, reaching for the pouch with trembling fingers, "we're going to eat." Later, after the children had fallen asleep with full stomachs for the first time in weeks, Eliza sat alone at the kitchen table, her wedding ring to James, recovered from the undertaker with Blackwood's money, clutched in her palm. The gold felt cold against her skin. "What would you have me do?" she whispered to the empty chair where James should have been sitting. "How can I marry him of all people? How can I not when the children are starving?" No answer came except the howl of the prairie wind and the soft breathing of her sleeping children. By dawn, Eliza had made her decision, though it felt less like a choice and more like surrendering to the inevitable current of a river too powerful to fight. In the dust-choked town of Willow Creek, hope died a little more each day that passed. For Eliza Montgomery, it had all but withered completely as she stared at the empty pantry, the hollow eyes of her 3 children reflected in the tarnished handle of the cupboard door. 6 months since typhoid took her husband James, leaving behind nothing but debts and hungry mouths to feed. The bank was coming for the farm tomorrow. The undertaker had been paid with her wedding ring. Her children hadn't eaten a proper meal in days. Perhaps, Eliza thought as she gripped the edge of the sink until her knuckles turned white, this was what it meant to reach the end of your rope. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. "Mama, I'm hungry," whispered 5-year-old Sarah, her blonde curls limp around a face grown too thin. Beside her, 7-year-old Thomas clutched the family Bible as if salvation might fall from between its pages if he held it tight enough. 10-year-old William, trying so hard to be the man of the house, stood at the window watching for miracles that never came. I know, darling, Eliza said, forcing brightness into her voice while grief and desperation clawed at her throat. We'll have something soon. The lie tasted bitter on her tongue. A sharp knock at the door made them all jump. William's hand instinctively reached for his father's old rifle, propped in the corner, empty of ammunition, but still a comfort. Stay here, Eliza whispered, smoothing her threadbare dress before opening the door to face whatever new misfortune had come calling. The silhouette against the setting sun belonged to a man both familiar and strange. Wyatt Blackwood, owner of the largest cattle ranch in the territory. His shadow stretched across her porch like the reach of his influence stretched across the county. Dark eyes surveyed her from beneath the brim of an expensive hat. His face, weathered by sun and hardship, despite his 35 years. Mrs. Montgomery, he said, removing his hat. May I come in? Eliza hesitated. Blackwood had been her husband's rival, their properties sharing a contested boundary and a bitter history. James had blamed Wyatt for blocking access to the creek during last year's drought, causing their first failed crop. The argument had nearly come to blows at the general store the month before James fell ill. Mr. Blackwood, this isn't a good time, she said, trying to block his view of the empty home behind her. I suspect there hasn't been a good time in your house for months, he replied, his voice neither kind nor cruel, simply matter of fact. That's why I'm here. Against her better judgment, Eliza stepped aside. The children shrank back as Wyatt ducked to enter the small farmhouse, his presence filling the modest room. He nodded at the children, then turned his attention back to Eliza. I'll be direct, Mrs. Montgomery. I know the bank is foreclosing tomorrow. I know your situation. Heat flushed Eliza's cheeks. Shame burned hotter than the anger. Have you come to gloat, to buy our land for pennies once the bank takes it? Something flashed in Wyatt's eyes. Not anger, but something harder to define. No, ma'am. I've come with a proposal. William stepped forward, shoulders squared despite his small frame. We don't need your charity, Mr. Blackwood. Wyatt's mouth twitched, almost a smile. Good thing I'm not offering any, son. He turned back to Eliza. What I'm offering is a business arrangement, a marriage. The room went silent. Even little Sarah, too young to fully understand, sensed the weight of the moment. That's absurd. Eliza whispered, her hand finding the doorframe for support. Is it? Wyatt challenged. You need security for your children. You're about to lose everything. I need... He paused, choosing his words carefully. I need a wife to satisfy the terms of my father's will. He left conditions that I must be married by my 36th birthday to maintain full ownership of the Blackwood Ranch. That's 3 months from now. Eliza stared, disbelief warring with the first dangerous flicker of hope. You can't be serious. I've never been more serious. This is a practical solution for both of us. His eyes swept the barren kitchen, the children's gaunt faces. Your husband and I had our differences, but I respected him. I won't see his family starve when I have the means to prevent it. And what would this arrangement entail? Eliza asked, her voice barely audible. You and your children would move to my ranch. You'd have my name, my protection, food on your table. Your children would want for nothing. You would manage the household as my wife. And what would you expect in return? The question hung in the air between them, heavy with implication. Wyatt met her gaze steadily. Respect, loyalty, a convincing appearance as my wife in public. His jaw tightened. Nothing more, unless you wish it. William stepped closer to his mother, protective even in his youth. Why us? Why my ma? Wyatt considered the boy. Because she's respectable. Because people in town already know she's in trouble and won't question why she'd accept such an offer. Because... He stopped himself, something vulnerable flashing across his face before disappearing behind his stoic expression. I'll give you until morning to decide, Wyatt said, placing his hat back on his head. The bank arrives at noon. I'll return at 10. He reached into his pocket and placed a small pouch on the table. The unmistakable clink of coins echoed in the silent room. That should help with tonight, regardless of your decision. Without waiting for a response, he turned and walked out, closing the door softly behind him. Through the window, Eliza watched him mount his horse, a magnificent black stallion that seemed as imposing as its master, and ride away, dust swirling in his wake. Thomas approached the table, eyeing the pouch. "Is that money, Mama?" Eliza didn't move, her mind racing with the impossible choice before her. Marriage to a man her husband had despised, a business arrangement in place of love, trading her independence for security. "What are we going to do?" William asked, his young voice heavy with a burden no child should bear. The last light of day filtered through the window, illuminating the faces of her children, James's children, their futures hanging on her decision. Outside, the vast Wyoming territory stretched toward the horizon, beautiful and merciless, caring nothing for the struggles of a widow and her children. "First," Eliza said, reaching for the pouch with trembling fingers, "we're going to eat." Later, after the children had fallen asleep with full stomachs for the first time in weeks, Eliza sat alone at the kitchen table, her wedding ring to James, recovered from the undertaker with Blackwood's money, clutched in her palm. The gold felt cold against her skin. "What would you have me do?" she whispered to the empty chair where James should have been sitting. "How can I marry him of all people? How can I not when the children are starving?" No answer came except the howl of the prairie wind and the soft breathing of her sleeping children. By dawn, Eliza had made her decision, though it felt less like a choice and more like surrendering to the inevitable current of a river too powerful to fight. When Wyatt Blackwood returned precisely at 10 o'clock the next morning, Eliza was waiting on the porch, her meager belongings and 3 solemn children ready beside her. "I have conditions," she said before he could speak. One dark eyebrow raised, slightly, but he nodded. "Name them." "My children come first, always. They will be treated as your own." "Agreed. I won't share your bed." The words came out in a rush, heat flooding her cheeks. Something like amusement flickered in his eyes. "As I said yesterday, nothing happens unless you wish it. And one day, when I've saved enough, I want the right to leave if I choose. With my children, with no resistance from you." This time, Wyatt's expression hardened. "The children stay. They'll bear my name, and I'll not have them raised in poverty after I've given them a home." Eliza's chin lifted. "Then I can't accept." For a long moment they stared at each other, 2 stubborn wills clashing in the morning light. Finally, Wyatt sighed. 3 years, he said. "Give me 3 years. After that, if you still wish to leave, you may take the children, and I'll provide a modest allowance for their care. But only if you can offer them a stable home." Eliza considered this, aware of the bank representative's horse already visible in the distance, coming to claim everything she had left. 5 years, she counted, "and you'll help me establish that stable home when the time comes." The hint of a smile touched his lips. "You drive a hard bargain, Mrs. Montgomery." He extended his hand. "Do we have an agreement?" Eliza looked at his outstretched hand, calloused, strong, capable of violence and perhaps of kindness too. Behind her, the farmhouse held every memory of her life with James. Before her stood a future unknown but certain in at least one respect. Her children would not starve. She placed her hand in his, feeling the warmth and strength of his grip. "Mrs. Blackwood," she corrected, sealing her fate with 2 words. "And yes, we have an agreement." The marriage took place that same afternoon in the parlor of the town's justice of the peace, witnessed only by the children and Wyatt's foreman. No celebration followed, no wedding night. Instead, as dusk fell, Eliza found herself riding beside Wyatt in his wagon, her children huddled around her, approaching the sprawling Blackwood Ranch, her new home, her new life, her new prison, and, as the imposing main house came into view, silhouetted against the fading light, Eliza couldn't help but wonder what secrets awaited her behind its walls, and what kind of man her new husband truly was beneath his inscrutable exterior. The Blackwood Ranch materialized from the darkness like a kingdom unto itself. Lanterns glowed in windows of the sprawling two-story home, its weathered boards and stone chimney declaring permanence in a land where most structures seemed temporary. As the wagon approached, Eliza felt her children press closer, William's arm protectively encircling his siblings. "This is it," Wyatt said, the first words he'd spoken in nearly an hour. He handed the reins to a stable boy who appeared from the shadows. "Caleb, help with Mrs. Blackwood's belongings." The boy's eyes widened at the introduction, darting between Wyatt and Eliza before he nodded and hurried to the back of the wagon. "Mrs. Blackwood," a woman's voice called from the porch. She stood silhouetted in the doorway, wiping her hands on her apron. "So it's true then." "Mrs. Hayworth," Wyatt acknowledged, helping Eliza down from the wagon. "This is my wife, Eliza, and her children, William, Thomas, and Sarah." The housekeeper studied them with undisguised curiosity. Her grey hair was pulled into a severe bun, her expression caught between disapproval and fascination. "Never thought I'd see the day," she muttered, then straightened her shoulders. "I've prepared the East Wing as requested. Dinner's keeping. Warm." Inside, the house revealed itself in layers of contradiction. Expensive furniture sat beside practical pieces. Hunting trophies adorned walls hung with fine art. A massive stone fireplace dominated the main room, where flames crackled against the evening chill. "You have a lovely home," Eliza offered, the words feeling inadequate in her mouth. "It's yours now, too," Wyatt replied, though his tone suggested the transfer of ownership wasn't quite so simple. The children stood frozen in the entryway, overwhelmed by the sudden transition from poverty to plenty. Sarah's thumb crept toward her mouth, a habit Eliza thought she'd outgrown. "Are you hungry?" Mrs. Hayworth asked, her voice softening as she addressed the children. Thomas nodded cautiously while William remained stoic, still playing protector. "Come along then," the housekeeper said, leading them toward the kitchen. "Let's get some food in you while your mother gets settled." Eliza moved to follow, but Wyatt's hand on her arm stopped her. His touch was light but insistent. "I should show you your rooms first." "Our rooms?" she repeated, emphasizing the plural. Something like amusement flickered in his eyes. "Did you think I'd forgotten our arrangement so quickly?" He led her up a grand staircase to the East Wing. "This will be your bedroom," he said, opening a door to reveal a space larger than her entire previous home. A four-poster bed dominated the room, dressed in quilts that looked softer than anything Eliza had touched in years. A copper bathtub stood behind a painted screen, and a dressing table with an oval mirror reflected her shocked expression. "The children's room connects through there," Wyatt continued, gesturing to a door in the corner. "My quarters are in the West Wing." Relief and something more complicated washed through Eliza. "Thank you for honoring our agreement." Wyatt's expression hardened slightly. "I'm a man of my word, Mrs. Blackwood. Business or not, this is still a marriage. I expect loyalty, discretion, and respect. In return, I'll provide everything you and the children need." "And what about what they want?" Eliza challenged, finding her voice. "Within reason," he conceded. "Education, decent clothes, security. The rest," he shrugged, "the rest is luxury, and luxury must be earned." Before she could respond, a commotion erupted from downstairs, a child's wail followed by the crash of breaking china. Eliza rushed down the stairs to find Sarah in tears, a shattered plate at her feet. Mrs. Hayworth was already sweeping up. the mess, while Thomas stood frozen, wide-eyed. I'm sorry, Sarah sobbed, her small body trembling. Accidents happen, Mrs. Hayworth soothed, but Sarah's eyes were fixed beyond the housekeeper, on Wyatt, who had followed Eliza down. The stairs. The child's terror was palpable. In her world, broken things meant consequences they couldn't afford. Eliza moved to comfort her daughter, but Wyatt reached Sarah first. He crouched down to her level, his large frame somehow less intimidating as he balanced on his haunches. "You know what I do when I break something?" he asked, his voice gentler than Eliza had yet heard it. Sarah hiccuped, shaking her head. "I say 3 things." He held up a finger. "First, is anyone hurt?" He looked around dramatically. "Doesn't seem so." Another finger rose. "Second, can it be fixed?" He examined a piece of the plate. "This one can't, but that's all right because—" A third finger joined the others. "Third, we remember that things can be replaced, but people can't." Sarah blinked, tears still clinging to her lashes. "You're not mad?" "About a plate?" "No." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a handkerchief, offering it to the little girl. "Now, I believe there's some apple pie that survived the calamity. Would you like some?" The transformation in Sarah was immediate. She nodded eagerly, taking the handkerchief to dry her eyes. Later, after the children had been bathed and tucked into beds finer than any they'd known, Eliza found Wyatt in his study, ledgers spread before him in the lamplight. "That was kind," she said, lingering in the doorway. "What you did for Sarah." He didn't look up. "I'm not the monster your husband painted me to be." James was... She hesitated, loyalty warring with truth. He was proud and afraid. Those last years, the drought had him desperate, and desperate men look for someone to blame. Wyatt finally met her gaze. "I know something about that." The vulnerability in his statement hung between them, an offering she wasn't ready to accept. "Why did you really choose me?" Eliza asked instead. "There must be a dozen women in town who'd marry you without conditions." Wyatt's mouth curved slightly. "Perhaps I wanted one who would. That makes no sense. Get some rest, Mrs. Blackwood. Tomorrow we'll come early here." He returned to his ledgers, a clear dismissal. "Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time. So if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Dawn broke over the Blackwood Ranch with ruthless efficiency. Eliza woke to unfamiliar sounds, boots on wooden floors, distant cattle, the clatter of kitchen work already underway. For a disorienting moment, she reached across the bed for James before reality reasserted itself. This wasn't her bed. James was gone, and she had married Wyatt Blackwood. The children adapted with the resilience of youth. By the end of the first week, Sarah was trailing after Mrs. Hayworth like a devoted puppy. Thomas had discovered the ranch's library and spent hours poring over books they could never have afforded. William alone maintained his distance, watching Wyatt with suspicious eyes. "He needs time," Eliza told Wyatt over breakfast on the 7th day, after William had refused Wyatt's offer to show him how to mend a saddle. "Time won't change facts," Wyatt replied, buttering his bread with precise movements. "The boy blames me for taking his father's place. Haven't you?" Wyatt's knife paused. "A husband, perhaps? A father. That's earned, not given." He set down the knife. "I have business in town today. You should come, be seen. People will talk less if we're seen together." The trip to town revealed the full breadth of Wyatt's influence. Shopkeepers who had turned Eliza away months before now fawned over her. Credit was offered freely. Mrs. Blackwood became a title that opened doors previously closed. In the general store, she overheard whispers behind the calico bolts. Didn't waste any time finding herself a rich husband. Poor James barely cold. In his grave, Eliza's cheeks burned as she examined a spool of thread with unnecessary focus. Mrs. Blackwood Wyatt appeared at her side, his voice carrying just far enough to reach the gossiping women. "Have you found everything you need? For the children?" His hand settled at the small of her back, proprietary yet supportive, a clear message to the onlookers. "Yes, thank you," she managed, grateful and resentful in equal measure for his intervention. Outside, she whispered, "You didn't have to do that." "I did." His jaw tightened. "My wife won't be the subject of town gossip." "But I am," she countered. "We both knew that would happen. There's a difference between speculation and disrespect." His eyes narrowed as he scanned the street. "Speaking of which," a man approached, swaying slightly, though the hour was still early. Frank Thornton, the banker who had been set to foreclose on Eliza's farm. "Well, well," Thornton sneered, blocking their path. "If it isn't the grieving widow and her savior." His gaze traveled over Eliza in a way that made her skin crawl. "Tell me, Blackwood, was she worth the price? James Montgomery must be spinning in his grave knowing his wife is now warming your—" The rest of his words disappeared as Wyatt moved. With startling speed, one moment Thornton was leering, the next he was pinned against the hitching post, Wyatt's forearm across his throat. "Choose your next words carefully," Wyatt said, his voice deceptively calm. "They may be your last." Terror flashed across Thornton's face. "It was just a joke. Mrs. Blackwood is my wife," Wyatt continued, as if the banker hadn't spoken. "You will address her with respect or not at all. Am I clear?" Thornton nodded frantically. Wyatt released him, and the banker stumbled away, gasping. "Was that necessary?" Eliza asked when they were alone in the wagon heading home. "Yes." Wyatt's knuckles were white on the reins. "Thornton was your husband's friendly banker until he wasn't. He'd have taken your home and offered you his bed in the same breath." The blunt assessment struck Eliza silent. She'd always sensed the banker's inappropriate interest, but had never had the luxury of confronting it directly. "How did you know that?" she finally asked. Wyatt's gaze remained fixed on the road ahead. "I make it my business to know the character of men I deal with. Is that why you argued with James? You knew Thornton was going to betray him?" Something flickered across Wyatt's face, a hesitation, perhaps even guilt. "Your husband wouldn't have accepted my warning." The implication hung in the air between them. Had Wyatt tried to help James? Had her husband's pride cost them everything? "There's more to your history with James than a property dispute, isn't there? I say 3 things. He held up a finger. "First, is anyone hurt?" He looked around dramatically. "Doesn't seem so." Another finger rose. "Second, can it be fixed?" He examined a piece of the plate. "This one can't, but that's all right because—" A third finger joined the others. "Third, we remember that things can be replaced, but people can't." Sarah blinked, tears still clinging to her lashes. "You're not mad?" "About a plate?" "No." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a handkerchief, offering it to the little girl. "Now, I believe there's some apple pie that survived the calamity. Would you like some?" The transformation in Sarah was immediate. She nodded eagerly, taking the handkerchief to dry her eyes. Later, after the children had been bathed and tucked into beds finer than any they'd known, Eliza found Wyatt in his study, ledgers spread before him in the lamplight. "That was kind," she said, lingering in the doorway. "What you did for Sarah." He didn't look up. "I'm not the monster your husband painted me to be." James was... She hesitated, loyalty warring with truth. He was proud and afraid. Those last years, the drought had him desperate, and desperate men look for someone to blame. Wyatt finally met her gaze. "I know something about that." The vulnerability in his statement hung between them, an offering she wasn't ready to accept. "Why did you really choose me?" Eliza asked instead. "There must be a dozen women in town who'd marry you without conditions." Wyatt's mouth curved slightly. "Perhaps I wanted one who would. That makes no sense. Get some rest, Mrs. Blackwood. Tomorrow will come early here. He returned to his ledgers, a clear dismissal. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time. So if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Dawn broke over the Blackwood Ranch with ruthless efficiency. Eliza woke to unfamiliar sounds, boots on wooden floors, distant cattle, the clatter of kitchen work already underway. For a disorienting moment, she reached across the bed for James before reality reasserted itself. This wasn't her bed. James was gone, and she had married Wyatt Blackwood. The children adapted with the resilience of youth. By the end of the first week, Sarah was trailing after Mrs. Hayworth like a devoted puppy. Thomas had discovered the ranch's library and spent hours poring over books they could never have afforded. William alone maintained his distance, watching Wyatt with suspicious eyes. "He needs time," Eliza told Wyatt over breakfast on the 7th day, after William had refused Wyatt's offer to show him how to mend a saddle. "Time won't change facts," Wyatt replied, buttering his bread with precise movements. "The boy blames me for taking his father's place. Haven't you?" Wyatt's knife paused. "A husband, perhaps? A father? That's earned, not given." He set down the knife. "I have business in town today. You should come, be seen. People will talk less if we're seen together." The trip to town revealed the full breadth of Wyatt's influence. Shopkeepers who had turned Eliza away months before now fawned over her. Credit was offered freely. Mrs. Blackwood became a title that opened doors previously closed. In the general store, she overheard whispers behind the calico bolts. Didn't waste any time finding herself a rich husband. Poor James barely cold. In his grave, Eliza's cheeks burned as she examined a spool of thread with unnecessary focus. Mrs. Blackwood. Wyatt appeared at her side, his voice carrying just far enough to reach the gossiping women. "Have you found everything you need for the children?" His hand settled at the small of her back, proprietary yet supportive, a clear message to the onlookers. "Yes, thank you," she managed, grateful and resentful in equal measure for his intervention. Outside, she whispered, "You didn't have to do that." "I did." His jaw tightened. "My wife won't be the subject of town gossip." "But I am," she countered. "We both knew that would happen. There's a difference between speculation and disrespect." His eyes narrowed as he scanned the street. "Speaking of which," a man approached, swaying slightly, though the hour was still early. Frank Thornton, the banker who had been set to foreclose on Eliza's farm. "Well, well," Thornton sneered, blocking their path. "If it isn't the grieving widow and her savior." His gaze traveled over Eliza in a way that made her skin crawl. "Tell me, Blackwood, was she worth the price? James Montgomery must be spinning in his grave knowing his wife is now warming your—" The rest of his words disappeared as Wyatt moved. With startling speed, one moment Thornton was leering, the next he was pinned against the hitching post, Wyatt's forearm across his throat. "Choose your next words carefully," Wyatt said, his voice deceptively calm. "They may be your last." Terror flashed across Thornton's face. "It was just a joke. Mrs. Blackwood is my wife," Wyatt continued, as if the banker hadn't spoken. "You will address her with respect or not at all. Am I clear?" Thornton nodded frantically. Wyatt released him, and the banker stumbled away, gasping. "Was that necessary?" Eliza asked when they were alone in the wagon heading home. "Yes." Wyatt's knuckles were white on the reins. "Thornton was your husband's friendly banker until he wasn't. He'd have taken your home and offered you his bed in the same breath." The blunt assessment struck Eliza silent. She'd always sensed the banker's inappropriate interest, but had never had the luxury of confronting it directly. "How did you know that?" she finally asked. Wyatt's gaze remained fixed on the road ahead. "I make it my business to know the character of men I deal with. Is that why you argued with James? You knew Thornton was going to betray him? Something flickered across Wyatt's face, a hesitation, perhaps even guilt. Your husband wouldn't have accepted my warning. The implication hung in the air between them. Had Wyatt tried to help James? Had her husband's pride cost them everything? There's more to your history with James than a property dispute, isn't there? Wyatt's silence was confirmation enough. Eliza turned to watch the landscape roll by, pieces of a puzzle she couldn't yet assemble shifting in her mind. That night, a storm swept across the prairie, violent and sudden. Sarah's terrified screams woke the household. By the time Eliza reached her daughter's bedside, Wyatt was already there, awkwardly patting the sobbing child's back. "It's all right," he was saying, discomfort and determination warring in his expression. "The house has stood through worse." Sarah launched herself into Eliza's arms, still trembling. "I want Papa," she wailed. "Papa always scared away the thunder." "Monsters." Wyatt's face shuttered closed. He rose to leave, but Eliza caught his sleeve. "The lantern," she whispered. "James used to create shadow animals on the wall to distract her." Understanding dawned in Wyatt's eyes. He adjusted the lantern's position and with surprising dexterity formed his hands into the shape of a rabbit, its shadow dancing across the wall. "Look, Sarah," Eliza encouraged. "Mr. Blackwood knows about the shadow animals too." The little girl's sobs slowed as she watched, fascination gradually replacing fear. "Can you make a horse?" She hiccuped. Without a word, Wyatt's hands transformed, creating a galloping stallion that pranced across the bedroom wall. Sarah's delight grew with each new creation, a wolf, a bird in flight, even a comical bear that made her giggle, despite the thunder still rumbling outside. Thomas had wandered in, followed by William, who lingered in the doorway, watching the scene with complex emotions crossing his young face. "Where did you learn to do that?" Thomas asked, settling beside Wyatt. A shadow passed over Wyatt's features. "My mother taught me long ago." The words emerged tight, reluctant. It was the first personal detail he had revealed, and Eliza found herself hungry for more. She must have been very patient, she ventured. "She was," Wyatt agreed, his focus still on the shadow play. "She had to be, with my father." The statement contained volumes, but before Eliza could inquire further, Wyatt stood abruptly. "The storm's passing," he said, though the rain still lashed against the windows. "You should all get some sleep." He was gone before anyone could object, his footsteps fading down the hallway. Sarah, exhausted from fear and excitement, was already drifting off. Thomas crawled into his own bed, but William remained in the doorway, his expression troubled. "He's trying to replace Pa," the boy whispered as Eliza tucked the younger children in. "No one could ever replace your father," Eliza assured him. "Mr. Blackwood knows that." "Then why is he acting like he cares about us?" "It's just business, isn't it? That's what you said." Eliza smoothed back William's hair, so like James's had been. "Sometimes, William, people surprise us, and sometimes we surprise ourselves." Later, unable to sleep, Eliza crept downstairs for a glass of water. A light still burned in Wyatt's study. Through the partially open door, she saw him sitting at his desk, not working, but staring at something in his hands. Moving closer, she realized it was a small daguerreotype in a tarnished silver frame. A woman's face gazed back at him, her features indistinct in the dim light. The floorboard beneath Eliza's foot creaked. Wyatt's head snapped up, the vulnerability in his expression replaced instantly with his usual guarded look. He tucked the photograph into a drawer. "It's late," he said. "Neither invitation nor dismissal. I couldn't sleep." Eliza hesitated, then stepped into the room. "The children appreciated your help tonight, especially Sarah. I'm not trying to replace your husband." The statement came abruptly, echoing William's concerns with such precision that Eliza wondered if Wyatt had overheard them. "I know," she said. "Do you?" His gaze was challenging. Because whatever your son believes, whatever the town thinks, that's not why I brought you here. Then why did you? The question that had haunted her since his appearance on her porch a week ago. Wyatt stood, his chair scraping against the wooden floor. You should go back to bed, Mrs. Blackwood. Eliza, she corrected, surprising herself. If we're to live together for 5 years, you might as well use my name. Something shifted in his expression. Surprise, perhaps even approval. Eliza, then. The sound of her name in his deep voice sent an unexpected shiver through her. She took a step backward, suddenly aware of how improper it was to be alone with him in the night, regardless of their arrangement. "Good night, Mr. Blackwood." "Wyatt," he countered, the ghost of a smile touching his lips, "if we're to live together for 5 years." Eliza nodded, retreating from the study with her heart beating faster than it should. Outside his door she paused, looking back at the man who was her husband in name only, wondering what secrets lay behind his carefully constructed walls, and why she suddenly felt so determined to discover them. As autumn deepened across the Wyoming territory, the Blackwood household settled into an uneasy rhythm. Each morning, Eliza woke before dawn to help Mrs. Hayworth with breakfast. Each evening, the family gathered around the dining table like actors in a play, rehearsing the roles of husband, wife, and children without quite believing the performance. But some things couldn't be faked. Sarah's nightmares subsided, replaced by eager questions about ranch life. Thomas devoured books from Wyatt's library, his mind blossoming with knowledge. Even William's hard edges softened slightly, though he maintained a careful distance from the man whose name he now bore. Eliza found herself watching Wyatt when he thought no one was looking, the gentleness in his calloused hands when he helped Sarah onto her first pony, the patience in his voice as he explained cattle breeding to Thomas, moments that contradicted everything James had ever said about the man. One crisp morning, Eliza was hanging laundry when she noticed William trailing Wyatt toward the stables, maintaining a distance of about 20 paces. The boy had been doing this for days, his curiosity finally overcoming his resentment. Today, however, Wyatt stopped suddenly and turned. "If you're going to follow me, you might as well make yourself useful," he called to William. The boy froze, caught. "I wasn't following." "You know?" Wyatt raised an eyebrow. "Then you just happen to need something from the stables every time I head there." William's face flushed. "I like the horses." "So do I." Wyatt gestured to the stable. "Come on, then. I've got a new colt that needs socializing. Thought you might want to help." From her vantage point by the clothesline, Eliza couldn't hear William's response, but she saw the hesitation in his stance, the moment of decision, and then, miracle of miracles, her stubborn son followed Wyatt into the stable. They emerged an hour later, William's expression animated as he described something with sweeping hand gestures. Wyatt nodded seriously, offering occasional comments that made the boy's eyes widen. "What happened?" Eliza asked, when William returned to the house. "Mr. Blackwood says I have a way with horses," he reported, trying and failing to hide his pride. "Said I might make a fine horseman someday if I'm willing to learn." "And are you willing to learn?" William considered this, his young face solemn. "Pa would want me to, wouldn't he? To learn whatever I can?" Eliza's throat tightened. "Yes, sweetheart, your father would want that very much." That night, Eliza found Wyatt on the porch, smoking a cheroot as he stared out at the darkened landscape. She settled into the chair beside him, drawing her shawl tighter against the evening chill. "Thank you for what you did with William today." Wyatt exhaled a stream of smoke. "Boys got a natural touch with animals. Be a waste not to develop it." "It's more than that," Eliza insisted. "You're giving him something to care about beyond his grief." Wyatt's profile remained impassive in the dim light. "I know something about that kind of grief." The words invited questions, but before Eliza could frame one, Hoofbeats approached. A rider materialized from the darkness, his horse lathered despite the cool evening. "Mr. Blackwood," the man called, dismounting heavily. "There's trouble." Wyatt was on his feet in an instant. "What kind of trouble, Jackson?" "Rustlers hit the north pasture. Got away with about 30 head. Tate's been shot." "How bad?" "Shoulder. Doc's with him now, but he's asking for you." Wyatt turned to Eliza. "I have to go." "Of course." She stood, suddenly aware of how quickly violence could intrude on their precarious peace. He hesitated, then said, "Bar the doors after I leave. Jackson will stay on the porch tonight." The instruction, its implication that danger might reach even here, sent a chill through her. "Be careful," she found herself saying. Something like surprise flickered across his face. "Always am." After he'd gone, Eliza sat alone in the parlor, unable to sleep. The house creaked and settled around her, no longer simply large, but suddenly vulnerable. Outside, Jackson paced the porch, his footsteps a reminder of unseen threats. Hayworth appeared with 2 cups of tea, settling into the chair opposite Eliza. "First time's always the hardest," the housekeeper observed, passing Eliza a steaming cup. "First time?" "Waiting for him to come back from trouble." Mrs. Hayworth sipped. "Her tea. Won't be the last either. Territory's still wild, no matter what the law says." Eliza's hands tightened around her cup. "Has he been hurt before?" The housekeeper's weathered face softened slightly. "He doesn't tell those stories, does he? Course not. Man's got more scars than he'll admit to, inside and out." "You've known him a long time." "Since he was born, worked for his father before him." Mrs. Hayworth's expression darkened. "Meanest son of a—" "Pardon me, meanest man I ever knew. Old Gerald Blackwood treated his horses better than his family." Eliza leaned forward. "His family? I didn't know Wyatt had siblings." "No, Wyatt—" Mrs. Hayworth's lips pressed into a thin line. "Had a brother, younger, Ethan." She glanced toward the door, as if checking that Wyatt wouldn't appear. "Sweet boy, too gentle for the life his father had planned." "What happened to him?" The housekeeper sighed heavily. "Died young. Fever took him when he was 12. Nearly destroyed Wyatt. He'd practically raised the boy himself, trying to shield him from their father." She shook her head. "After that, something in Wyatt changed. Harder, colder, started standing up to the old man." "And his mother?" Eliza asked, remembering the shadow puppets, the daguerreotype in Wyatt's study. "Died, giving birth to Ethan." Wyatt was 10. The pieces began to fit together. Wyatt's solitary nature, his understated kindness toward her children, his insistence on honoring their agreement about separate bedrooms. A man shaped by loss and hardened by responsibility, yet still capable of compassion. "Why are you telling me this?" Eliza asked. Mrs. Hayworth fixed her with a knowing look. "Because you've been watching him like he's a puzzle you're trying to solve. Thought you might need a few more pieces." Before Eliza could respond, the sound of approaching riders cut through the night. She rushed to the window, relief flooding through her at the sight of Wyatt's broad-shouldered silhouette dismounting in the yard. When he entered, exhaustion lined his face. Blood stained his shirt, not his own, he assured them, but Tate's. The wounded ranch hand was stable. The rustlers tracked to the territorial border, but ultimately escaped. "You should rest," Eliza said, taking his hat and gloves. Wyatt nodded, too tired to argue. As he headed toward the stairs, he paused. "Thank you for waiting up." The simple acknowledgement felt monumental. The rustler incident marked a turning point. Wyatt began including William in more ranch activities, teaching him to ride properly, to mend fences, to recognize the signs of healthy cattle. The boy's resistance melted gradually, replaced by tentative respect. One evening, as Eliza was helping Sarah with her reading, William burst into the parlor. "Ma, Mr. Blackwood says I can help with the roundup next week if you say it's all right." The excitement in his voice, the first real enthusiasm he'd shown since his father's death, was impossible to dismiss, though the thought of her 10-year-old participating in something so dangerous made Eliza's heart clench. "I don't know, William. Roundups can be dangerous. I'd be with the chuck wagon mostly," he explained rapidly. "Mr. Blackwood says I need to learn the basics before I get near the cattle. Please, Ma, please." "Let me discuss it with Mr. Blackwood," she hedged. She found Wyatt in his study later that night, comparing maps of their grazing lands. "William told me about the roundup," she began. Wyatt looked up. "I should have spoken to you first." "Yes, you should have." Eliza crossed her arms. "He's too young." "For actual cattle work, yes. For learning how a ranch operates by helping with meals and supplies, no." Wyatt set down his pencil. "I started younger than he is." "That doesn't make it right." "What's right is giving the boy a chance to find his place here," Wyatt countered. "He's been wandering like a ghost since you arrived. This is the first thing that's lit a fire in him." Eliza hesitated, torn between maternal protection and the undeniable truth. In Wyatt's words, "He'd be safe, you promise. I'll keep him by my side the entire time." The pledge carried weight, both the promise of protection and the unexpected alignment of Wyatt taking responsibility for her son's well-being. 2 days, she conceded. Not the full week. And he comes home at the first sign of trouble. Wyatt's mouth curved in what might have been a smile. "You drive a hard bargain, Mrs. Blackwood." "I've had practice recently," she replied, matching his tone. Their eyes met, and something changed in the air between them, a current of understanding, perhaps even respect. For a moment, Eliza felt the strangest urge to reach across his desk and touch his hand, to bridge the careful distance they'd maintained. The impulse frightened her. This was a business arrangement, not a true marriage. James had been dead less than a year, yet here she was, finding herself drawn to the very man her husband had despised. "I should check on the children," she said abruptly. Wyatt nodded, his expression unreadable. "Good night, Eliza." William's participation in the roundup proved transformative. He returned sunburned, exhausted, and utterly exhilarated. For days afterward, he recounted tales of Cowboy's skills, stories told around campfires, the vastness of the land beyond the ranch house, the land beyond the ranch. "Mr. Blackwood says I have a good eye for strays," he told Eliza proudly as she tucked him in. "Says that's important because one lost calf means lost profit, and profit is what keeps the ranch going." "Mr. Blackwood is teaching you a lot," Eliza observed. William nodded thoughtfully. "He's different than Pa said, not mean at all, just serious." He picked at a loose thread on his blanket. "Pa was wrong about some things, wasn't he?" The question cut deep, loyalty to James warring with the evidence before her eyes. "Your father was a good man, who sometimes made mistakes," she said carefully. "We all do. Even Mr. Blackwood, especially Mr. Blackwood," she replied, thinking of the mysteries still surrounding her husband of convenience. William seemed satisfied with this answer. As Eliza kissed his forehead, he whispered, "I still miss Pa, but I'm glad we're here now." The admission lodged in Eliza's heart, bittersweet and true. October brought an invitation to the harvest social in town, the first major event since their hasty wedding. The prospect of facing the entire community as Mrs. Blackwood filled Eliza with dread. "We don't have to go," Wyatt said when she expressed her concerns. "The ranch provides ample excuse to decline." "If we don't attend, people will talk more, not less," Eliza reasoned. "Better to face them directly." The night of the social arrived crisp and clear. Eliza wore her finest dress, new, purchased with Blackwood money, while the children were scrubbed and polished to gleaming. Wyatt, in a black suit that emphasized the breadth of his shoulders, looked like a different man entirely. As they entered the community hall, conversation stuttered to a halt, then resumed with increased intensity. Eliza felt each pair of eyes like a physical touch, judging, speculating, assuming the worst. "Chin up," Wyatt murmured, his hand firm at the small of her back. "You faced worse than gossips." The reminder of all she'd survived, poverty, widowhood, near starvation, steadied her. Beside her, William straightened his shoulders in unconscious mimicry of Wyatt's posture. Gradually, the crowd's curiosity gave way to the usual social patterns. The children were pulled into games with their peers. Wyatt was drawn into discussions of cattle prices with other ranchers. Eliza found herself surrounded by the wives of prominent townsmen, their questions thinly veiled attempts to uncover the truth of her sudden marriage. "It must have been such a whirlwind courtship," Mrs. Patterson said, her smile not reaching her eyes. "None of us had any idea you and Mr. Blackwood were acquainted." "The heart works in mysterious ways," Eliza replied blandly, unwilling to offer details for their dissection. "Indeed, and the children seem to be adjusting well to their new situation." Mrs. Thornton joined in, her emphasis making clear that situation was a polite substitute for something less favorable. "Children are resilient when given security and kindness," Eliza said, allowing a hint of steel to enter her voice. "My husband provides both in abundance." The women exchanged glances, their disappointment at her discretion evident. Before they could press further, a commotion erupted near the refreshment table. Frank Thornton, the banker, stood swaying slightly, his voice carrying above the music. "Quite the success story, isn't she?" he slurred, gesturing toward Eliza with his punch cup. "From destitute widow to rancher's wife in record time makes a man wonder what special talent secured such a fortunate match." The hall fell silent. Heat rushed to Eliza's face, not embarrassment but pure fury. Before she could respond, Wyatt materialized beside her, his expression controlled but dangerous. "You owe my wife an apology, Thornton," he said, each word precise. "And cold," the banker sneered. "Just making conversation, Blackwood. No harm intended." "Harm was your only intention." Wyatt stepped closer. "Apologize now." Something in his tone made even the drunk banker hesitate. "Meant no disrespect to the lady," he mumbled finally. "Not good enough." Wyatt's voice remained even, but his eyes had hardened to flint. "Mrs. Blackwood deserves your sincere regret for impugning her character, and your assurance it won't happen again." Thornton glanced around, finding no allies in the watching crowd. "My apologies, Mrs. Blackwood," he managed, the words clearly costing him. "Won't happen again." Wyatt nodded once, then turned to the musicians, frozen mid-note. "I believe you were playing a waltz." The music resumed hastily. Wyatt extended his hand to Eliza. "Mrs. Blackwood, may I have this dance?" The request took her by surprise. In the weeks of their marriage, they had maintained careful physical distance. Now, with every eye upon them, he was inviting a public display of unity. "Yes," she said, placing her hand in his, feeling the strength and warmth of his fingers closing around hers. He led her to the center of the floor, one hand settling at her waist as the other continued to hold hers. The contact, even through layers of fabric, sent an unexpected thrill through her. "You didn't have to do that," she murmured, as he guided her into the steps of the waltz. "I did." His gaze held hers. "No one speaks about my wife that way, not even if our marriage began as a business arrangement." The surprising fierceness of his protection warmed her. "Thank you." They moved together with unexpected harmony, his lead confident without being domineering. "You dance well," Eliza remarked, surprised by the grace in Wyatt's movements. For such a formidable man, he guided her with unexpected lightness. "My mother insisted," he replied, the rare personal detail offered like a gift between them. "Said no son of hers would stomp around a dance floor like his father." The mention of Gerald Blackwood, the cruel patriarch Mrs. Hayworth had described, hung between them. Eliza seized the opportunity. "Will you tell me about her someday? Your mother?" Something vulnerable flickered across his face. "Perhaps. Someday." As the music swelled, Eliza became acutely aware of the warmth of his hand at her waist, the faint scent of leather and pine that clung to him, the way his eyes, usually so guarded, held hers with an intensity that made her breath catch. This close, she could see flecks of gold in his brown irises, the small scar near his temple, the way his mouth softened when he wasn't scowling. When the dance ended, he didn't immediately release her. For one suspended moment, they stood connected, something unspoken passing between them. "Ma!" Sarah's voice broke the spell. The little girl bounded up, her earlier shyness forgotten. "Miss Patterson says there's going to be apple bobbing. Can I try?" The moment dissolved. Wyatt stepped back, his expression once again unreadable, as Eliza turned to her daughter. Throughout the remainder of the evening, Eliza found herself watching. Wyatt, the way he spoke respectfully to the older women, listened attentively to the rancher's concerns, slipped extra cookies to Thomas when he thought no one was looking. The man she observed bore little resemblance to the villain James had described. On the ride home, Sarah fell asleep against Wyatt's side. When they arrived at the ranch, he lifted her with careful gentleness, carrying her inside as if she weighed nothing. "I'll take her," Eliza whispered in the hallway outside the children's room. Wyatt shook his head. "I've got her." He carried Sarah to her bed, setting her down with such tenderness that something in Eliza's chest constricted. After the children were settled, Eliza found herself unable to sleep. The events of the evening replayed in her mind. Thornton's cruelty, Wyatt's defense, the unexpected intimacy of their dance. She wrapped her shawl around her shoulders and padded downstairs, drawn to the soft glow of light from Wyatt's study. She hesitated outside his door, then knocked softly. "Come in," he called, his voice tinged with surprise. Few people disturbed him in his sanctuary. He sat behind his desk, jacket discarded, shirt sleeves rolled to his elbows, revealing corded forearms. An open ledger lay before him, but his attention was on a glass of whiskey cradled in his hand. "I thought you might still be awake," Eliza said, hovering in the doorway. Wyatt gestured to the chair across from him. Difficult to sleep after such an eventful evening. She settled into the offered seat, smoothing her skirts. "I wanted to thank you for what you did with Thornton." "No thanks necessary." Nevertheless, she met his gaze steadily. "It meant something to me." Silence stretched between them, comfortable rather than strained. Wyatt took a sip of his whiskey, his eyes never leaving hers. "Would you like one?" he asked, indicating the glass. The offer surprised her. "I don't usually. Tonight seems like an exception," she nodded, accepting the small rebellion against propriety. Wyatt poured another glass, the amber liquid catching the lamplight as he handed it to her. Their fingers brushed, the brief contact, sending warmth through her that had nothing to do with the alcohol. "To surviving social obligations," he said, raising his glass slightly. Eliza smiled. "To unexpected alliances." They drank, the whiskey burning a path down her throat, warming her from within. The moment felt dangerously intimate, sharing drinks. In the late hours, the house quiet around them. "May I ask you something?" she ventured. Wyatt's expression grew cautious. "You may ask. What really happened between you and James?" "The truth." He sighed, setting his glass down. For a moment she thought he would dismiss the question or offer another deflection. "We were friends once," he said finally, the admission clearly difficult. "Before you came to Wyoming, we worked together, drove cattle to market. I considered him a brother." The revelation stunned her. James never mentioned that. He wouldn't have, not after what happened. Wyatt's gaze turned distant. "There was a woman in town, Lily. She worked at the saloon, but she was different, kind, smart. his voice softened with memory. "James and I both fell for her. Hard." Understanding began to dawn. "And she chose you?" "She did. For a time." Pain flickered across his face. "We were to be married. James couldn't accept it. Started drinking, spreading rumors about her character, about mine, said I'd stolen her from him." "What happened to her?" Eliza asked, though something in his expression suggested she already knew the answer. "Influenza. Winter of '68. His fingers tightened around his glass. "She was gone before I could get the doctor from Carson City. The pieces fell into place. His solitary existence, the hesitation to form attachments, the strange mix of animosity and responsibility he seemed to feel toward James's family." "I'm sorry," Eliza said, the words inadequate for the depth of loss she sensed in him. Wyatt nodded once, acknowledging her sympathy without inviting more. "After she died, James stopped his campaign against me, seemed ashamed even. We reached an uneasy truce. Then he met you, started his farm upstream from my ranch, and the water dispute was real enough. Drought was bad. I tried to work with him on a solution, but he was convinced I was trying to ruin him out of revenge." Wyatt took another sip of whiskey. "Pride's a dangerous thing in a place where cooperation means survival." "Why didn't you tell me this before?" Eliza asked. His eyes met hers directly. "Would you have believed me over the memory of your husband?" The question struck her silent. Would she have? Or would she have dismissed it as manipulation, an attempt to justify his actions? "I don't know," she admitted honestly. "Neither did I." Wyatt leaned back in his chair. "Seemed better to start fresh. Let you form your own judgments." The vulnerability in the statement touched her. Here was a man who had lost, grieved, and continued on, who had taken responsibility for 3 children not his own, who had honored an unusual arrangement with quiet dignity. "Thank you for telling me now," she said softly. He nodded, then glanced at the clock on the mantel. "It's late. You should rest." The dismissal was gentle but firm. Eliza rose, returning her empty glass to his desk. As she turned to leave, she paused. "Wyatt," he looked up, his name on her lips still a novelty. "I'm forming my own judgments now. They're not what I expected." Before he could respond, she slipped from the room, her heart beating faster than it should have. Winter descended on Wyoming with merciless swiftness. The first storm struck in early November, coating the ranch in a blanket of white that transformed the landscape into something otherworldly. The children, having never experienced such abundance of snow in the valley where their farm had been, were ecstatic. "Look, Ma," Sarah called from the window. "It's all white, like heaven." Even Wyatt seemed affected by their enthusiasm, producing sleds from a storage shed and showing the children how to safely navigate the slopes near the house. Eliza watched from the porch, wrapped in a thick shawl, as her serious, somber son whooped with joy, sliding down a hill, Wyatt steadying the sled from behind. "Never thought I'd see him smile like that again," Mrs. Hayworth remarked, appearing beside her with steaming cups of coffee. "Nor did I," Eliza admitted, accepting the offered drink. The housekeeper studied her face. "You're looking at him different. And these days, there was no need to specify who him was." Eliza flushed, not from the cold. "Things change." "Indeed they do." Mrs. Hayworth's knowing gaze made Eliza feel transparent. "Just be sure you know what you're changing into." The cryptic warning lingered as November gave way to December. Christmas approached, bringing with it both excitement and melancholy. It would be their first holiday without James, their first in this new life. "We should cut a tree," Wyatt suggested one evening at dinner, the casual offer clearly directed at the children. "There's a grove of pines in the north pasture that could spare one." Thomas's eyes widened. "A real Christmas tree, with decorations." "If your mother approves," Wyatt said, glancing at Eliza. She nodded, touched by his consideration. "That would be lovely." The expedition to find the perfect tree became an adventure. Bundled against the cold, they rode in the sleigh Wyatt had unearthed from the barn. The children's excitement was contagious, their breath visible in the winter air as they pointed out candidate trees. "That one," Sarah declared, indicating a modest pine that stood slightly apart from its fellows. "Excellent choice," Wyatt agreed, helping William with the saw he'd brought. Father and son, the word formed in Eliza's mind unbidden, worked together to fell the tree while Thomas and Sarah gathered pine cones for decorations. Watching them, Eliza felt a strange peace settle over her. This wasn't the life she had planned, but in this moment, with frost glittering on pine needles and her children's laughter echoing across the snow-covered landscape, she couldn't imagine wanting anything else. That night, as they decorated the tree with ribbons, pine cones, and small carved figures Wyatt produced from a trunk in the attic, Sarah asked the question they'd all been avoiding. "Will Pa be able to see our tree from heaven?" The innocent query silenced the room. William stiffened, his earlier joy dimming. Thomas looked uncertainly between his siblings and his mother. Before Eliza could formulate a response, Wyatt crouched beside Sarah. "I believe he can," he said, his voice gentle but firm, "and I think he'd be proud of how brave you've all been." "Do you think he'd be mad that we're happy sometimes?" Thomas asked. The worry etched on his young face. Wyatt considered this with the seriousness the question deserved. "No, Thomas. A father's greatest wish is for his children to be happy, even when he can't be with them." The simple wisdom of his answer brought tears to Eliza's eyes. This man, who had never fathered children of his own, understood the essence of a parent's love with startling clarity. Later, after the children had gone to bed, Eliza found Wyatt in his study. A familiar routine now. Their late-night conversations had become a cherished ritual, a space where pretense fell away. "That was kind, what you said to the children," she said, settling into her usual chair. Wyatt glanced up from his paperwork. It was true. Still, she studied him in the lamplight. "You've been good for them in ways I didn't expect, He set down his pen. "They're good children. Make it easy." "Not always," she smiled. "Sarah tested you thoroughly when she broke your mother's vase last week." "It was just a vase you kept in your bedroom, the only thing of hers you display." Eliza's observation was gentle but pointed. Wyatt's expression softened slightly. She would have liked Sarah's spirit. "Would have told me the vase was meaningless compared to a child's confidence. She sounds wise." She was. He hesitated, then opened his desk drawer, removing the daguerreotype Eliza had glimpsed months before. He handed it to her without comment. The woman in the image was beautiful in a quiet way. Her eyes, even in the faded photograph, held the same direct gaze Eliza had come to associate with her son. "You have her eyes," Eliza said softly, "and her temper, according to Mrs. Hayworth." "A formidable combination." She returned the photograph, their fingers brushing in the exchange. "Thank you for sharing her with me." The moment stretched between them, weighted with significance. Wyatt's gaze held hers, something unspoken passing between them. "Eliza," he began, his voice rougher than usual. A crash from upstairs shattered the moment. They both rose instantly, rushing toward the sound. In the children's room, they found Sarah thrashing in her bed, caught in a nightmare. Thomas stood beside her, trying unsuccessfully to wake his sister. "She keeps crying for Pa," he explained, his face pinched with worry. Eliza gathered her daughter into her arms, murmuring soothing words as the little girl gradually calmed. Wyatt lingered in the doorway, his expression unreadable as he watched the scene. Once Sarah had settled back to sleep, Eliza joined him in the hallway. "The holidays are difficult," she explained softly. "They miss him more." Wyatt nodded. "As they should." The simple acknowledgement, His consistent respect for James's place in their lives, despite their complicated history, touched something deep within her. "What were you going to say?" she asked. "In your study, before we heard Sarah." Something vulnerable flickered across his face, nothing that can't wait for another time. But as December progressed, that time never seemed to come. The ranch demanded constant attention as winter tightened its grip. Cattle needed extra feed, fences required repairs after each storm, and preparations for spring calving consumed Wyatt's days. Christmas morning dawned clear and bright. The children woke early, their excitement palpable as they discovered small gifts beneath the tree. Books for Thomas, a carved wooden horse for William, a rag doll with real glass eyes for Sarah. Eliza had used her household allowance to purchase a new hat for Wyatt, practical but finer than his everyday wear. His gift to her came in a small box, simply wrapped. Inside lay a silver locket, oval and intricately engraved. When opened, it revealed 3 small locks of hair, one from each of her children, arranged in a delicate pattern. "How did you—" she began, touching the precious keepsake with trembling fingers. "Mrs. Hayworth helped," Wyatt admitted. "She said mothers should keep their children close to their hearts, even when they grow too big to hold." The thoughtfulness of the gift, its acknowledgement of what truly mattered to her, brought tears to her eyes. "It's perfect, thank you." As she fastened it around her neck, their gazes met and held. Something had changed between them, something neither had yet put into words. The business arrangement that had brought them together had evolved into something far more complex. Respect, understanding, and perhaps, if Eliza were honest with herself, the beginnings of deeper feelings. That night, after the children had finally exhausted themselves with their new treasures, a knock came at the ranch house door. The hour was late, the weather bitter. Wyatt answered, hand instinctively moving to the gun he kept nearby. On the porch stood a man Eliza had never seen, thin, haggard, eyes haunted by something more than the winter cold. "I'm looking for Wyatt Blackwood," he said, his voice raw as if unused to speaking. "You've found him," Wyatt replied, wariness evident in his stance. The stranger's gaze moved past him to where Eliza stood in the parlor doorway. "And Mrs. Blackwood, I presume?" "Who's asking?" Wyatt demanded, stepping slightly to block the man's view of her. "My name is Michael Montgomery." The stranger's eyes, James's eyes, fixed on Eliza with uncomfortable intensity. "I'm James's brother, and I've come for what's mine, The name struck Eliza like a physical blow. Michael Montgomery, James's estranged brother, a man her husband had mentioned only in bitter fragments. Missing for years, presumed dead, or worse. "James never said you were alive," she managed, gripping the doorframe for support. "James said a lot of things that weren't true." Michael's gaze shifted between her and Wyatt, calculating. "May I come in? It's bitter out here." Wyatt didn't move from his protective position. "State your business first." "Fair enough." Michael rubbed his gloved hands together. "I've been away. California, then Alaska, gold fields. Just got word about James passing some months back." His eyes hardened. "Also heard his widow married mighty quick to the neighbor he hated most." The accusation hung in the air, sharp as icicles. Eliza lifted her chin, refusing to be shamed. "My children were starving." Mr. Blackwood offered a solution. "I'm sure he did." Michael's gaze turned calculating. "The thing is, I've also heard about a property dispute between my brother and Blackwood here. Something about water rights. Interesting timing, his death and your arrangement." The implication was unmistakable. Wyatt's posture shifted subtly, tension coiling through his large frame. "Choose your next words with extreme care," he warned, voice deadly quiet. Michael raised his hands. "Just making observations. Strange circumstances, you have to admit." "Mr. Montgomery," Eliza intervened, her heart pounding but her voice steady. "My husband died of typhoid, the same fever that swept through half the valley. There were a dozen witnesses, including the doctor who treated him for weeks. And yet, here you are in his enemy's house, wearing his name." "That's enough," Wyatt growled. "You've made insinuations against my wife and me without cause. Either state your actual business or leave my property." Michael's smile didn't reach his eyes. "My business is simple, James's land. By rights, as his only living male relative, his property should pass to me if his wife remarries." "That land was sold to pay James's debts," Eliza countered. "There was nothing left." "So you say." Michael's gaze hardened. "But I'd like to see proof, records, deeds of sale, legal documents. At this hour, on Christmas night?" Wyatt's skepticism was palpable. "Tomorrow will do." Michael stepped back, surveying the ranch house with obvious envy. "I'll be staying at the Carson City Hotel. I expect to meet with both of you and your lawyer if you have one at noon." After he'd gone, Eliza stood shaking in the parlor. "This can't be happening." Wyatt closed and bolted the door, his expression grim. "Did James ever mention a clause about his property going to his brother if you remarried?" "Never. And I handled all our legal papers after he died." She pressed her fingers to her temples. "There was nothing. The bank took everything." "Then Montgomery is fishing," Wyatt concluded. "Question is, for what?" "Money, most likely. Michael always wanted what James had, according to the few stories James told." She hesitated. "There's something else. The way James spoke of him, it was more than brotherly rivalry. There was genuine fear there." Wyatt's gaze sharpened. "Fear of what?" "I don't know." James would never elaborate. She wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly cold despite the fire. "But I think we should keep the children away from him, just as a precaution." Sleep proved elusive that night. Eliza lay awake, memories of James's rare mentions of his brother surfacing like debris. After a storm, Michael had left home young, gotten in trouble with the law back east. There had been a fight between the brothers, violent enough that James had broken contact completely. Why had he returned now? If he truly believed he had a claim to James's non-existent property, why wait 6 months after his brother's death? The next morning, she found Wyatt already dressed and reviewing documents in his study. He'd been up for hours, judging by the cold coffee at his elbow and the stack of papers. He'd assembled. "I've sent word to my lawyer in Carson City," he said without preamble. "He'll meet us at my office in town at 11. "Before we meet Michael," Wyatt nodded, "I want Harrington to review everything first. If Montgomery has some obscure legal claim, we need to know, and if he doesn't, then we need to understand what he's really after." They left the children with Mrs. Hayworth, instructing her to keep them inside and alert the ranch hands to any visitors. The ride to Carson City was tense, the winter landscape beautiful but foreboding under heavy gray skies. "I should have told you about Michael before," Eliza said, breaking the silence as their horses picked their way through a snow-covered pass. "I just never thought he'd appear." "You couldn't have known." Still, she glanced at his profile, strong and steady against the white backdrop. "I'm sorry to bring this trouble to your door." Wyatt's gaze met hers briefly. "You and the children are my family now, Eliza. Your troubles are mine." The simple declaration warmed her despite the chill. "Even though our marriage was just a business arrangement?" "Was," he repeated, the single word laden with meaning. Before she could pursue this revealing slip, Carson City appeared before them, smoke from chimneys rising into the leaden sky. Harrington, Wyatt's lawyer, was a precise man with spectacles and an impressive mustache. He reviewed the paperwork with methodical attention. "There's nothing here," he concluded finally. The bank's foreclosure was legal. The sale of assets to cover remaining debts was properly executed. Mrs. Blackwood was the sole legal heir, and once those debts were settled, there was nothing left to inherit. He polished his spectacles thoughtfully. If Mr. Montgomery is claiming otherwise, he's either misinformed or deliberately misleading. So we simply tell him there's nothing to claim, Eliza suggested. Harrington and Wyatt exchanged glances. Men don't usually travel hundreds of miles in winter on a whim, the lawyer noted. I suspect there's more to his visit than a simple inheritance claim. We'll find out soon enough, Wyatt said, checking his pocket watch. It's nearly noon. The Carson City Hotel stood at the center of town, its lobby a welcome respite from the biting cold. Michael was waiting in a private dining room, a half-empty whiskey bottle before him. Right on time, he observed, gesturing for them to sit. I've taken the liberty of ordering lunch. This isn't a social call, Wyatt replied, remaining standing. You've made claims about my wife's previous husband's estate. We've brought documentation proving those claims are without merit. Michael's expression didn't change as Harrington laid out the papers methodically, explaining each document's significance. Only a slight tightening around his eyes betrayed his displeasure. Very thorough, he said when the lawyer finished, almost as if you expected someone to question the convenient transfer of Montgomery land to Blackwood control. The land was sold at public auction, Harrington corrected. Mr. Blackwood purchased it legally, as did 3 other buyers who acquired different parcels. And the water rights remained with the property, as legally required, Wyatt stated flatly. Michael leaned back, studying them. You've got it all figured out, don't you? Perfect paper trail, convenient marriage, no loose ends. What exactly are you implying? Eliza demanded, her patience wearing thin. I'm implying, dear sister-in-law, that a great many coincidences aligned. Perfectly for Wyatt Blackwood. Michael's smile was cold. My brother dies. His land goes up for auction. His widow and children face destitution. And who should ride in like a savior but the very neighbor James was feuding with? You think I had something to do with your brother's death? Wyatt's voice was dangerously quiet. I think typhoid is a convenient explanation for a man who dies leaving everything his rival wants. Land, water rights. His gaze slid to Eliza. A beautiful wife. The insinuation hung in the air like smoke. Eliza felt sick with fury. My husband died in my arms after weeks of suffering, she said, her voice shaking with suppressed rage. I nursed him day and night. I watched him fade from the man I loved to a shell before he finally found peace. How dare you cheapen his death with your disgusting implications? Such loyalty, Michael observed, from a woman who took another man's name before her husband's side of the bed was cold. Wyatt moved so quickly, neither Eliza nor Harrington had time to react. One moment Michael was smirking, the next he was pinned against the wall, Wyatt's forearm across his throat. You will not speak to or about my wife in that manner again, Wyatt said, each word precise despite the fury evident in every line of his body. You will apologize to her, then you will leave Carson City and never return. Do I make myself clear? Michael struggled uselessly against Wyatt's iron grip. And if I don't? Then the authorities might become very interested in the outstanding warrants for your arrest in Colorado and Nevada. Fraud, theft, assault. Shock registered on Michael's face. How did you? I make it my business to know who's threatening my family. Wyatt eased his hold slightly. Harrington here has copies ready to send to the sheriff. Choose your next move carefully. When released, Michael straightened his collar, his earlier bravado replaced by wary calculation. Perhaps I've been hasty in my assumptions. Perhaps, Wyatt agreed coldly. I meant no disrespect to Mrs. Blackwood, Michael continued, not meeting Eliza's eyes. Grief makes us say regrettable things. It wasn't grief speaking, Eliza replied, seeing through the hollow apology. It was greed and spite, James told me enough about you to know the difference. Michael's expression hardened. My brother wasn't the saint you think he was. I never said he was, but he was an honest man who worked hard for his family. Something you might not understand. For a moment, something like genuine emotion crossed Michael's face. Anger, yes, but also a flash of pain, quickly masked. You don't know everything about James. I knew enough, Eliza countered. I knew he feared you. I knew he cut ties with you for good reason. And I know you're not here out of brotherly love or concern for his property. Michael stared at her for a long moment, then laughed without humor. You're right about one thing. I'm not here for property that's already gone. He reached into his jacket, producing a folded document. I'm here for this. Harrington took the paper, unfolding it carefully. As he read, his expression grew grave. It appears to be a loan agreement between James Montgomery and Michael Montgomery for a substantial sum. $5,000, Michael confirmed. Money I lent my dear brother 3 years ago to keep his farm afloat during the first drought. Money he never repaid. The amount was staggering, more than most families in the territory saw in a decade. Eliza's mind raced, trying to reconcile this information with what she knew of their finances. That's impossible, she said finally. James never had that kind of money. Our farm was modest. We struggled even in good years. Exactly. Michael's smile was unpleasant. He lost it, all of it, gambling in Carson City while telling his devoted wife he was negotiating cattle sales. The accusation struck Eliza speechless. James gambling away a fortune while they tightened their belts at home. It couldn't be true. The debt died with him, Harrington interjected. You have no legal standing to collect from his widow, especially given her financial situation at the time of his death. Perhaps not from her directly, Michael conceded, but from her new husband, who seems to have benefited considerably from my brother's demise. That's a different matter. The document is worthless, Wyatt stated flatly. No court would enforce it. Maybe not, but the story behind it might interest a great many people. Michael's gaze turned calculating. How James Montgomery gambled away a fortune. How his neighbor's cattle mysteriously thrived during the same drought that devastated his farm. How convenient it all worked out for Wyatt Blackwood in the end. Are you attempting to blackmail me? Wyatt's voice was dangerously soft. I'm offering a business arrangement, Michael corrected. $10,000, the original loan plus interest, and I disappear. No allegations, no uncomfortable questions about the timing of James's death or the speed of your marriage. Everyone saves face. The silence that followed was thick with tension. Eliza looked at Wyatt, seeing the muscle working in his jaw as he weighed their options. You have until tomorrow to decide, Michael continued, rising from his chair. I'll be at the hotel until noon. After that, I start sharing my concerns about my brother's untimely death with anyone who will listen. After he'd gone, Eliza sat trembling with rage and shock. It can't be true about James gambling. He wouldn't have... Wyatt and Harrington exchanged glances. There were rumors, the lawyer admitted reluctantly, about high-stakes games at the Silver Spur. James Montgomery's name came up occasionally. Why didn't you tell me? She asked Wyatt, the betrayal fresh and sharp. It wasn't my place to tarnish your memories of him, he replied quietly, and until now, it didn't matter. Didn't matter? She stood abruptly. My children's father might have gambled away their future, and you didn't think that mattered. Eliza, what else haven't you told me? About James, about your feud, about any of it? Her voice rose with each word. Harrington cleared his throat uncomfortably. Perhaps I should give you both a moment. After the lawyer's discreet exit, Wyatt moved toward her, stopping when she held up a hand. Don't, her voice shook. Just tell me the truth, all of it. He sighed heavily, suddenly looking tired beyond his years. James gambled. Not at first, but after the first crop failure, he got desperate. Started small. Card games at the saloon, betting on horse races. Then he met Michael again at the Silver Spur. Michael got him into deeper games, Eliza guessed. Wyatt nodded. High stakes, professional gamblers. James was out of his depth but too proud to stop. And you knew all this time. Watched him destroy himself, destroy us. The accusation hung between them. I tried to stop him, Wyatt countered, an edge entering his voice. Offered to buy part of his land at fair market value so he could pay his debts. Offered him work on my ranch. He refused every time, said he'd rather die than take my charity. So you just gave up on him? Let him ruin his family? What would you have had me do? Wyatt demanded, rare frustration breaking through his controlled exterior. Force help on a man who hated me, who accused me of trying to steal his land every time I offered a solution, who threatened to shoot me the last time I came to your farm? The revelation stunned her. He threatened you. When? A month before he fell ill. I'd heard he was planning to sell water rights to a mining operation upstream. Rights that would have devastated every ranch downstream, including mine. I confronted him directly. Wyatt's expression darkened with the memory. He was drunk, said he'd do whatever it took to save his farm, even if it meant ruining mine. When I tried to reason with him, he pulled a gun. Eliza sank back into her chair, the foundations of her marriage to James crumbling with each revelation. I never knew any of it. He protected you from the worst of his decisions, Wyatt acknowledged, his anger fading. Whatever his faults, he loved you and the children. That much was genuine. Tears burned behind her eyes. Was anything real? Anything he told me? Wyatt crouched beside her chair, tentatively taking her hand. His love for you was real. I saw that even when I questioned everything else about him. The simple certainty in his voice anchored her amid the storm of revelations. She looked at their joined hands, his large and weathered, hers smaller but equally marked by work and worry. Work and worry. Work. What are we going to do? Eliza finally asked, her voice steadier than she felt. Wyatt straightened, his expression resolute. We're not paying him. He'll spread rumors. Let him. Wyatt's jaw set in a determined line. This town has known me for 15 years. They've watched me build my ranch from nothing. A drifter's accusations won't stand against that history. But the children will know their father loved them. His gaze softened as it held hers. The rest isn't for them to bear. The conviction in his voice steadied her. This was the man she'd come to know over the past months. Principled, unwavering, far from the villain James had painted. We should go home, she said finally, before the weather turns. The ride back to the ranch was silent, each lost in private thoughts. Snow began falling as they crested the final ridge, the flakes thick and heavy against the darkening sky. The ranch house windows glowed with welcoming light, smoke curling from the chimney like a beacon calling them home. Mrs. Hayworth met them at the door, concern evident in her lined face. Everything all right? It will be, Wyatt replied, helping. Eliza with her coat. Where are the children? Kitchen, making Christmas cookies, though I fear there's more flour on them than in them. The normalcy of it. Children making mess and mischief in a warm kitchen struck Eliza with sudden poignancy. This was what mattered. Not James's mistakes, not Michael's threats, but the life they were building here. Go to them, Wyatt said, softly reading her expression. I'll speak with the hands about increasing patrols until Montgomery leaves the territory. In the kitchen, chaos reigned. Sarah's face and pinafore were dusted white. Thomas was methodically cutting dough into uneven stars, and William stood proudly by a tray of misshapen cookies cooling on the sideboard. Ma! Sarah cried, launching herself at Eliza's skirts, leaving flour handprints in her wake. We made treats! I can see that, Eliza laughed, the tension of the day momentarily easing. They look delicious. Mr. Blackwood will like them, Thomas declared with 10-year-old certainty, especially the ones with extra sugar. How do you know that? Eliza asked, touched by her son's consideration. William answered, surprising her, because he always takes a second helping of pie when Mrs. Hayworth makes it sweet, and he puts extra honey in his coffee when he thinks no one's looking. The observation, intimate, domestic, something only family would notice, caught Eliza off guard. Somehow, while she wasn't watching, her children had begun to truly see Wyatt, not as an interloper or merely their mother's new husband, but as a person with habits and preferences worth noting. Well then, she managed past the sudden tightness in her throat, we'll be sure to save the sweetest ones for him. Later, after the children were tucked into bed with full stomachs and sticky fingers, Eliza found Wyatt in the barn. He stood brushing down his horse, the rhythmic strokes betraying none of the day's tension. "The children made you cookies," she said, lingering in the doorway. He glanced up, the ghost of a smile touching his lips. "Did they now? William made sure they saved the sweetest ones for you. Apparently, he's noticed your sweet tooth." Something vulnerable crossed Wyatt's face. Sharp boy. Yes. She stepped fully into the barn, the familiar sense of hay and leather wrapping around her. They're becoming quite observant about many things. Wyatt's hands stilled on the brush. Such as the way you check their window latches when you think they're asleep, how you slip extra biscuits onto Thomas's plate because he's growing so fast, the fact that you've been teaching Sarah to whistle when you think I'm not listening. His expression remained carefully neutral. Children notice more than we give them credit for. So do wives, she countered softly. The word hung between them, wives, with all its implications. Not a temporary arrangement, not a business partnership, but something deeper and more permanent. "Eliza," he began, setting down the brush, "about today, I don't want to talk about Michael." She took a step closer. "Or James, or the past at all. What do you want to talk about?" "Us." The single syllable carried the weight of months of unspoken thoughts, of glances held too long, of careful distance maintained and slowly, inevitably breached. This marriage that started as convenience and has become something else. Wyatt went utterly still, his eyes never leaving hers. "Something else," he repeated, his voice rough. "I've watched you with my children. I've seen the man you are when you think no one is looking." Another step brought her close enough to catch the scent of him, leather and pine and honest work. "I know now that James was wrong about many things, including you. I'm not a perfect man, Eliza. His honesty was as direct as ever. I've made mistakes, done things I'm not proud of. I don't need perfection." Her courage surged, propelled by months of growing certainty. "I just need to know if I'm alone in what I'm feeling." The vulnerability in her admission seemed to crack something in his careful restraint. With deliberate slowness, he reached out, his calloused palm cupping her cheek with exquisite gentleness. "You're not alone," he said, the words barely above a whisper. "Not in that, not in anything, ever again if I have any say in it." Her hand rose to cover his, anchoring him to her. "When did it change for you? This arrangement of ours?" His thumb traced the curve of her cheekbone, reverent. "The first morning I came downstairs and found you teaching Sarah to knead bread. You had flour in your hair, circles under your eyes, and you were singing something soft and sweet. You looked at home, like you belonged here, always had." The memory, ordinary, domestic, warmed her. "And for me, it was watching you teach William to ride. You were so patient, so careful with his pride." That's all it took. His lips curved in a half smile. "Just being decent to your boy? Just being decent to your It was seeing the man James never let me see, the man who values people above property, kindness above pride. She leaned slightly into his touch. The man I've found myself falling in love with against all odds and expectations. The confession hung between them, impossible to take back. For a heartbeat, Wyatt didn't move, his expression frozen in surprise. Then, with deliberate care, he drew her closer. "Say it again," he murmured, his eyes searching hers. "If you mean it." "I love you," Eliza repeated, certainty replacing trepidation. "Not as part of our arrangement, not out of gratitude, but for the man you are." His forehead touched hers, their breaths mingling in the cold barn air. "I've loved you since the day you stood on your porch and tried to refuse my help to protect your children's pride." The admission, so long contained, broke something open between them. When his lips finally met hers, it wasn't a tentative first kiss but a homecoming, recognition of a truth they'd both been circling for months. His arms encircled her, strong and steady, as the storm outside intensified. In that moment, nothing existed beyond the circle of warmth they created. Not Michael's threats, not James's ghost, not the uncertain future. Just two people who had found love in the most unlikely circumstance. Later, walking hand in hand back to the house through swirling snow, Eliza felt a peace she hadn't known in years. Whatever Michael Montgomery planned, they would face it together. They hadn't reckoned with William. The boy stood in the hallway as they entered, his face pale in the lamplight. "Who's Michael Montgomery?" he asked without preamble. Eliza froze. "William, I heard Mrs. Hayworth talking to Cook. She said a man claiming to be Pa's brother came to town, said he's making trouble for you and Mr. Blackwood." Wyatt and Eliza exchanged glances. "How much did you hear?" Wyatt asked quietly. "Enough." The boy's chin jutted stubbornly, so like his father's in that moment that Eliza's heart ached. Is he really Pa's brother? Is he trying to take us away? "No, sweetheart." Eliza moved to her son, kneeling to meet his eyes. "No one is taking you anywhere. Mr. Montgomery is complicated. He knew your father a long time ago, but they weren't close. Then why is he here?" Wyatt crouched beside Eliza, his presence solid and reassuring. "Sometimes, William, people make claims about what they think they deserve. It doesn't make those claims true." The boy looked between them, his young face serious beyond his years. "Is he a bad man?" "He's a desperate man," Wyatt answered carefully. "And desperate men sometimes do foolish things." William absorbed this, then asked the question Eliza had been dreading. Did Pa owe him money? How much had he overheard? Eliza wondered, panic rising. How much of James's failings would his son now discover? Your father and Mr. Montgomery had complicated business dealings, Wyatt said before she could respond. Adult matters that don't change who your father was to you. He loved you very much, William. That's what matters. The simple truth, delivered without condescension or evasion, seemed to satisfy the boy. Is Mr. Montgomery going to hurt us? No, Wyatt's tone left no room for doubt. I won't allow that. William studied him intently, then nodded once. Good, because Thomas and Sarah need to feel safe, and Ma too. And you? Eliza asked softly. What do you need, my brave boy? A flash of vulnerability crossed his face, quickly masked. I'm fine. I just wanted to know the truth. After William returned to bed, Eliza leaned against the parlor door frame, exhaustion settling into her bones. How much do you think he heard? Enough. To worry him, not enough to understand. Wyatt stoked the fire, sparks dancing up the chimney. Children that age pick up fragments and fill in the blanks themselves, often with worse scenarios than reality. What are we going to do about Michael? Wyatt straightened, firelight casting his profile in sharp relief. First thing tomorrow, I'm going to Carson City to make him an offer he won't expect. Not money, I hope. No. His expression hardened. A final chance to leave peacefully before I present evidence of his outstanding warrants to the sheriff. You'd really do that to James's brother? To protect you and the children? Wyatt's gaze was steady as it met hers. Without hesitation, the certainty in his voice, the absolute commitment to their safety, touched something deep within her. This was what love looked like. Not grand gestures or passionate declarations, but the quiet, unwavering promise of protection and care. I'm coming with you, she decided. We face this together. His expression softened. Together, then. Morning brought fresh challenges. As they prepared to depart for Carson City, a rider appeared through the swirling snow. Harrington's clerk, face raw from the cold, bearing an urgent message. Mr. Montgomery collapsed at the hotel last night, the young man reported, stamping. His feet to restore circulation. Doctor says it's pneumonia, bad case. Eliza's stomach dropped. How bad? Critical, ma'am. Doctor doesn't expect him to last the day. The news struck with unexpected force. Despite everything, Michael was James's brother, her children's uncle, the last connection to their father's family. We should go to him, she said, surprising herself. Wyatt studied her face. Are you certain? After everything he said, everything he threatened? He's dying alone in a strange town. She met his gaze steadily. Whatever his sins, no one deserves. And that, the Carson City Hotel had transformed the gambling man's room into a sick room. A doctor emerged as they arrived, his expression grave. Family? He asked, eyeing them warily. Sister-in-law? Eliza confirmed, and her husband. The doctor nodded. He's conscious but fading. The cold journey here weakened his lungs considerably. I've done what I can for the pain. Michael barely resembled the threatening figure from yesterday. Pale and sunken against the pillows, his breathing labored. He seemed smaller somehow. His eyes, fever-bright, focused on them with effort. Come to watch me die, he managed between rattling breaths. No, Eliza moved to his bedside. No one should die alone, Michael. Something like surprise flickered across his gaunt features. Even me? Even you? Wyatt remained by the door, a silent sentinel, as Eliza took the dying man's hand. Despite everything, she felt a strange compassion. This broken man had been a boy once, a brother to James, before life and choices had hardened him. Got something to say, Michael gasped, his grip tightening convulsively on hers. About James. It doesn't matter now. Does. His eyes sought hers with desperate intensity. The loan was real, but not for gambling. Eliza frowned. I don't understand. Medicine. The word emerged on a painful exhale. Experimental treatment for Sarah's fever, year before. You arrived. The revelation struck her silent. Sarah had been deathly ill with scarlet fever as a toddler. Before Eliza had met James, he'd told her a local doctor had saved their daughter, but never mentioned extraordinary measures or costs. James wouldn't accept charity. Too proud, said it was a loan. Michael's breathing grew more labored. Never meant to collect, just wanted to know my niece. You saved Sarah? Eliza whispered, struggling to reconcile this act of generosity with the bitter man who had threatened them. Michael's lips curved in a ghost of a smile. Only decent thing I ever did. His gaze drifted to Wyatt. Papers in my coat. The loan. Burn it. Wyatt moved to the discarded coat, finding the document and tucking it inside his vest without comment. Why threaten us yesterday? Eliza asked. Why demand payment now? Michael's laugh turned into a racking cough. When he recovered, he wheezed, heard James died, broke, wanted to see if he told you, about me, about Sarah. His eyes closed briefly. He didn't. Figures. You could have just asked. Not my way. His grip weakened. Children, they well? The simple question, its genuine concern, moved her unexpectedly. They're thriving. Sarah's strong and healthy, loves to draw. Thomas reads everything he can find. William's becoming an excellent horseman. Something like peace settled over Michael's features. Good, that's good. I'll bring them to meet you, Eliza offered impulsively, when you're stronger. They both knew it was a kindness, not a promise that could be kept. Michael's smile held a lifetime of regret. Too late for that. Always was. His gaze shifted to Wyatt. You take care of them better than my brother did. I will, Wyatt promised, moving to stand beside Eliza. You have my word. Michael studied them for a long moment, understanding dawning in his feverish eyes. You actually love her, not just arrangement. Yes, Wyatt said simply. Good. Michael's breathing grew more labored. She deserves better than Montgomery men. His eyes drifted closed, his hand going slack in Eliza's. For a moment she thought him gone, but his chest still rose and fell in shallow movements. We should let him rest, the doctor suggested, returning to check his patient. Outside in the hallway, Eliza leaned against the wall, emotions tumbling through her. All this time, she whispered, James never told me. About Sarah, about the money, any of it. Pride, Wyatt said quietly. It makes men do foolish things. Like refuse help from neighbors during droughts. She looked up at him, finally understanding the depth of James's stubbornness, how it had cost them everything. Like that, Wyatt agreed, his hand finding hers. And like refusing to admit when they're wrong, even to those they love most. Michael Montgomery died as the winter sun set, his last connection to the world, the hand of a sister-in-law he barely knew. Eliza sat with him until the end, offering what comfort she could to a man who had lived hard and died with regrets. That night, in the privacy of a hotel room hastily arranged by Harrington, Eliza finally allowed herself to weep, for James, for Michael, for all the truths hidden and revealed too late. Wyatt held her through the storm of grief, his strength unwavering, asking nothing, offering everything. When her tears finally subsided, he produced Michael's loan document from his vest. It dies with him, he said, holding it out to her. Whatever you want to do with it. Eliza studied the paper, James's familiar signature beside Michael's scrawl, the enormous sum that had saved Sarah's life. Without a word, she rose and placed it in the fire grate, watching as the flames consumed the last physical evidence of James's secret. No more hidden truths between us, she said, returning to Wyatt's side. Promise me. No more secrets, he agreed, drawing her close. Just the life we build together day by day. Outside, snow continued to fall, blanketing Carson City in pristine, white, covering old tracks and creating new landscapes. Tomorrow they would return to the ranch, to the children, to the future stretching before them, unexpected, imperfect, but theirs to shape together. Spring came to Wyoming with fierce determination, winter's grip reluctantly yielding to longer days and warming breezes. On the Blackwood Ranch, new life emerged everywhere. Calves on wobbly legs following their mothers, green shoots pushing. Through thawed earth, wildflowers dotting the pastures with splashes of color. For Eliza, the changing season mirrored the transformation within their home. The calculated arrangement that had begun in desperation had blossomed into something genuine and sustaining. Wyatt's gruff exterior had softened, especially with the children. Sarah now greeted him with unrestrained hugs when he returned from working the range. Thomas sought his guidance on everything from math problems to fishing techniques. Even William, most resistant of all, had found in Wyatt a patient mentor who respected the boy's memories of his father while quietly building new traditions of their own. "Ma, look!" Sarah called from the garden where she and Wyatt were planting. "Vegetables." Her small hands pressed seeds into carefully prepared furrows, Wyatt kneeling beside her in the dirt, despite his fine ranch clothes. "I'm growing carrots." "And fine carrots they'll be," Wyatt assured her, his large hand gentle as he showed her how deep to plant each seed. "Best in the county, I'd wager." The sight, this powerful man tenderly teaching her daughter soil staining, his knees, patience in every movement, filled Eliza with quiet joy. From the parlor window she watched them, the moment too precious to interrupt. "He's good with her," Mrs. Hayworth observed, appearing at Eliza's side with fresh linens. "Never thought I'd see the day Wyatt Blackwood would be covered in garden dirt, teaching a little girl about growing things." "He's full of surprises," Eliza agreed, unable to keep the warmth from her voice. Mrs. Hayworth's shrewd gaze assessed her. "Not just for the arrangement anymore, is it?" The question was direct but kindly meant. Eliza felt her cheeks warm. "No, not for a long time now." "Good." The housekeeper nodded with satisfaction. About time this house had real love in it. Old Gerald Blackwood would be rolling in his grave to see his son happy. Was he truly so terrible? Eliza asked, thinking of the shadows that sometimes crossed. Wyatt's face when childhood was mentioned, Mrs. Hayworth's expression hardened. "Cruel doesn't begin to cover it. Beat both boys regular. Beat their mother too till the consumption took her. Only time I ever saw him show remorse was at her funeral." She shook her head at the memory. "Wyatt got the worst of it, trying to protect little Ethan. He never speaks of it, and likely never will. Some wounds don't need words." The housekeeper patted Eliza's arm. "But they do need healing. You've done that for him more than you know." As if sensing their discussion, Wyatt looked up from the garden, his eyes finding Eliza's through the window. The smile that transformed his face, private, tender, meant only for her, sent warmth cascading through her. This was no longer a marriage of convenience. It had become the most inconvenient thing imaginable, a union of hearts, unexpected and profound. That evening, after the children were asleep, Eliza found Wyatt on the porch, watching stars emerge in the vast Wyoming sky. Without a word, she settled beside him on the bench, her shoulder touching his. "Sarah's already asking when we can harvest her carrots," he said, amusement warming his voice. "She's never been known for patience. Wonder where she gets that from." His gentle teasing made her smile. Certainly not her mother, who waited a full 6 months before admitting she'd fallen in love with her husband of convenience. Wyatt's arm slipped around her shoulders, drawing her closer against the evening chill. "Convenient timing," he murmured, pressing a kiss to her temple. "I just about convinced myself you'd never see me as more than a provider." "Blind, stubborn man," she chided softly, turning to meet his gaze. "As if any woman could live with you day in and day out and not see the goodness beneath that stern exterior." He laughed, the sound still rare enough to delight her. "You forget. I had quite the reputation for being hard and unforgiving before you and the children arrived. And now? Now the hands laugh behind my back when Sarah brings me wildflower bouquets, or when Thomas follows me around asking his endless questions." His expression softened. "They think I've gone soft." "Have you?" His eyes, warm in the gathering darkness, held hers. "Only for you, only for them." The admission, simple, heartfelt, moved her deeply. She leaned into him, savoring his solid presence, the steadiness that had become her foundation. "I received a letter today," she said after a comfortable silence, "from my sister in St. Louis. She's finally saved enough to make the journey west this summer." Wyatt nodded, unsurprised. Eliza had mentioned Rebecca before, the younger sister who had been too frightened to join her original journey west with James, but who had remained faithful in correspondence. "She'll have questions," Eliza continued, "about my hasty remarriage, about how the children have settled." And what will you tell her? His tone was neutral, but she sensed the significance of her answer. Eliza turned fully toward him, taking his weathered hands in hers. I'll tell her I married a good man who saved us when we needed saving, who gave my children security and respect, who waited patiently for me to recognize what was growing between us. Her voice softened. I'll tell her I found love in the last place I expected, and that sometimes life's greatest blessings arrive disguised as necessary arrangements. The words hung between them, honest and unadorned. Wyatt's expression, typically so controlled, revealed everything, tenderness, wonder, and something fierce that might have been possessive pride. I'd like to make it official, he said abruptly. What do you mean? We're already married. On paper. His hands tightened on hers. But not fully understanding. Dawned. Though they had acknowledged their feelings, shared kisses and embraces, they had maintained separate bedrooms, honoring the original terms of their arrangement even as their hearts had moved beyond it. You want everything, he confirmed, his voice deepening. A real marriage, Eliza, in every sense. Heat bloomed in her cheeks, but she didn't look away. I want that too. The simple admission transformed his expression. Relief, desire, and joy chased across features usually so guarded. With deliberate care, he raised her hand to his lips, pressing a kiss to her palm that sent shivers through. Tonight? He asked, the single word laden with promise. She nodded, suddenly shy despite their months together, despite the depth of feeling between them. Tonight, later, as moonlight spilled through her bedroom window, Eliza stood nervous as a bride. In many ways, she was. Her first marriage had begun with love, but ended in disillusionment and grief. This one had started as business, but had transformed into something truer than she had imagined possible. A soft knock preceded Wyatt's entrance. He had changed into a clean shirt, his hair still damp from washing. The sight of him, powerful, certain, yet visibly affected by the moment, calmed. Her racing heart, having second thoughts, he asked, remaining by the door, giving her space to change her mind. No, she answered truthfully. Just remembering that frightened widow who agreed to your proposal last fall. How far we've come since then. He crossed to her slowly, each step deliberate. Do you regret it? Any of it? Not a single moment. She reached for him, fingers tracing the strong line of his jaw. Every step led us here. His arms encircled her, drawing her against the solid warmth of his chest. When he kissed her, it was with a tenderness that belied his strength. Reverent, cherishing, unhurried. This was not a man claiming what was his by legal right, but a lover offering his heart with each touch. I never thought to have this again, he murmured against her hair. A family, a woman who sees me, not just what I can provide. I see you, she whispered, hands rising to frame his face. The man who teaches my daughter about growing things, who encourages my sons to be strong and gentle both, who rebuilt our lives when everything seemed lost. Something fierce flashed in his eyes. You rebuilt them too, brought life back to this house, made it a home. Their next kiss deepened, years of solitude and months of growing affection, culminating in this moment of recognition. As clothing gave way to exploration, as whispers turned to sighs, they discovered each other anew, not as widow and provider, not as business partners, but as husband and wife in truth at last. In the gentle aftermath, Eliza lay curled against Wyatt's side, his heartbeat strong beneath her cheek. Outside, spring winds whispered through new leaves, carrying promise across the Wyoming landscape. Inside, in this room that was now truly theirs, a different kind of promise had been fulfilled. I kept thinking about our first meeting, Wyatt said softly, his fingers tracing idle patterns on her bare shoulder. You standing on that porch, pride in every line of your body despite everything you faced. I was terrified, she admitted, trying not to show it. You didn't. All I saw was courage, she smiled against his chest. All I saw was the man James had painted as our enemy, offering a solution I couldn't afford to refuse. And now, his question held vulnerability rarely revealed. Eliza raised herself on one elbow to meet his gaze directly. Now I see my husband, the father my children deserve, the love I never expected to find twice in one lifetime. The joy that transformed his face was worth every hardship that had brought them to this moment. As he pulled her close again, Eliza felt the final pieces of their shared life settling into place, not perfect, not unmarked by past sorrows, but real and enduring. Summer arrived in a blaze of heat and light. The ranch thrived under Wyatt's careful management, the spring calving season proving especially profitable. For the first time in years, there was money not just for necessities, but for small luxuries. New dresses for Sarah, books for Thomas, a proper saddle for William's growing riding skills. Rebecca's arrival in early July brought fresh perspective. Eliza's sister, petite, proper and thoroughly citified, viewed the sprawling ranch with undisguised amazement. "You actually live here?" she asked, as the wagon approached the main house. "It's enormous." "It seemed that way to me too at first." Eliza laughed, enjoying her sister's wide-eyed assessment. "Now it feels just right for our family." The children swarmed their aunt upon arrival, William taking charge of her trunks with newfound maturity, Thomas peppering her with questions about city life, Sarah demanding immediate attention for her new kitten. Through it all, Wyatt stood slightly apart, allowing the family reunion to unfold without intrusion. Later, after the initial excitement had settled, Rebecca found Eliza in the kitchen garden, harvesting Sarah's precious carrots that had finally matured. "He's not what I expected," her sister admitted without preamble. "Who? Wyatt?" Rebecca nodded, glancing toward the barn where Wyatt was showing William how to repair a bridle. "From your letters after James died, I thought he was some kind of opportunist, taking advantage of your situation." "I thought so too at first," Eliza acknowledged, brushing soil from a particularly fine carrot. "I was wrong, clearly." Rebecca's knowing smile made Eliza blush. "I've seen how he looks at you when you're not watching. That's no marriage of convenience." "It started that way, but it's not anymore," Rebecca stated with certainty. "The children adore him, especially William, which I wouldn't have believed possible from what you wrote last winter." Eliza watched her eldest son listening intently to Wyatt's instructions, his face serious with concentration. William needed a man who would respect James's memory while showing him a different way to be strong. Wyatt gave him that. "And what did Wyatt give you?" Rebecca asked softly. The question deserved honesty. "A second chance. Security for my children, yes, but also—" Eliza paused, searching for words adequate to the transformation. "He gave me back myself. The woman I was before fear and poverty ground me down. He saw strength in me when I could only see desperation." Rebecca squeezed her hand, tears brightening her eyes. "I'm happy for you, Liza. After everything you've endured, you deserve this." That evening, Wyatt surprised them all by producing a fiddle from the attic. As the family gathered on the porch to escape the summer heat, he played tunes remembered from his youth. Lively reels that had the children clapping, soulful ballads that made Rebecca sigh romantically, and finally, as twilight deepened toward night, a gentle waltz. "Mrs. Blackwood," he said formally, setting aside the instrument and extending his hand to Eliza, "may I have this dance?" The echo of that first public dance at the Harvest Social brought warmth to her cheeks. Without hesitation, she placed her hand in his, allowing him to lead her into the open space of the porch. They moved together with practiced ease, months of shared life creating a harmony that needed no words. Rebecca watched with transparent delight while the children giggled at the novelty of seeing their mother and Wyatt engaged in such frivolity. "Never thought I'd see that," Mrs. Hayworth remarked to Rebecca, nodding toward the dancing couple. "Man was a stone before your sister arrived. Now look at him." "Love changes people," Rebecca observed wisely. "So does finding the right partner," the housekeeper countered. "Someone who makes you more yourself, not less." As the impromptu waltz ended, Wyatt surprised Eliza by dipping her dramatically, eliciting cheers from their audience. When he set her upright again, his expression, visible only to her in their close embrace, held such naked adoration that her breath caught. "I love you," he murmured, the words meant for her alone. "And I you," she replied, marveling at how, naturally, the sentiment now flowed between them. Later, after Rebecca had retired to the guest room and the children were settled for the night, Eliza and Wyatt lingered on the porch, savoring the rare moment of solitude. The vastness of the Wyoming. Night spread above them, stars scattered like diamonds across black velvet. "Rebecca asked me something interesting today," Eliza said, her head resting against Wyatt's shoulder as they gazed at the night sky. "What's that?" "If I ever regretted saying yes to your proposal." His arm tightened around her waist. "And what? Did you tell her?" "The truth." She turned to face him, moonlight silvering his features. "That it was the best decision I never wanted to make." A slow smile spread across his face. "Quite the romantic declaration, Mrs. Blackwood." "I'm a practical woman," she countered, returning his smile. "But I told her something else too." "And what was that?" "That sometimes life's greatest blessings come disguised as impossible choices." Her hand rose to caress his cheek, the texture of his beard familiar beneath her fingers. "That sometimes what looks like the end of everything is really just the beginning." He caught her hand, pressing a kiss into her palm. "Wise woman, I've learned a few things these past months." Her voice softened. "Mostly about second chances, and how they don't always look the way you expect." The quiet intimacy of the moment enveloped them, the vast Wyoming night, the distant lowing of cattle, the soft creaking of the porch swing beneath them. So different from the desperate fear that had gripped her when Wyatt first appeared on her doorstep with his unlikely proposition. "I have something for you," Wyatt said after a comfortable silence. He reached into his pocket, producing a small cloth pouch. "Been carrying it for weeks, waiting for the right moment." Curious, Eliza opened the drawstring, tipping the contents into her palm. A ring caught the moonlight, delicate silver filigree surrounding a small pearl, nothing like the simple gold band James had given her or the utilitarian ring Wyatt had provided for their civil ceremony. "It was my mother's," he explained, his voice roughening. "Her mother's before that, the only thing of value Gerald couldn't bring himself to sell or gamble away." The significance of the gift, this precious family heirloom entrusted to her, brought tears to her eyes. "Wyatt, I can't—" "You can," he interrupted gently. "It belongs to the woman I love, the mother of my children. The claim, those children, were indeed now his in every way that mattered, filled her with quiet joy. When did you decide to give me this?" His expression turned reflective. "The night Sarah had that fever in April. Remember? She was calling for her father in her sleep." Eliza nodded. The spring illness had frightened them all, memories of James's fatal fever still too raw. "You were exhausted after sitting up with her for 2 nights, Wyatt continued. "I told you to rest, that I'd watch her." His voice dropped lower. "You handed her to me without hesitation, trusted me with your most precious child when she was vulnerable." "Of course I did," Eliza said simply. You're her father now." That's when I knew. His eyes, so often guarded with others, held hers with naked emotion. That we were truly a family, not by arrangement or necessity, but by choice, by love. With gentle reverence, he took the ring and slid it onto her finger, replacing the plain. "Banned from their hasty ceremony, a new beginning," he murmured, "if you'll have it." In answer, Eliza leaned forward, capturing his lips with hers. The kiss deepened, carrying all the promise of their shared future, no longer shadowed by past tragedies or present uncertainties. A small voice interrupted their embrace. "Ma! Papa Wyatt!" They turned to find Sarah in her nightgown, clutching her doll, brown curls tousled from sleep. "What is it, sweetheart?" Eliza asked, concerned. "I had a bad dream." The little girl's lower lip trembled. "About the man who came at Christmas, the angry one. Michael Montgomery's ghost surfacing in a child's nightmare." Wyatt motioned Sarah closer, lifting her effortlessly onto his lap when she approached. "That man can't hurt anyone anymore," he assured her, his large hand smoothing her tangled hair. "He's gone, and we're all safe." Promise? Sarah looked between them, seeking the absolute certainty only parents could provide. "Promise, Wyatt." And Eliza answered in unison. Satisfied, Sarah nestled against Wyatt's chest, her small body relaxing as he hummed a tuneless lullaby. Within minutes, she was asleep again, trusting and secure in his arms. "I should take her back to bed," Eliza whispered. "Let her stay a while," Wyatt replied, his expression softening as he gazed at the sleeping child. "Nightmares need extra comfort to fade completely." The understanding in his voice, his instinctive knowledge of what a frightened child needed, touched Eliza deeply. This man, who had never fathered children of his own, had become the parent her children deserved, protective yet gentle, strong yet tender. As they sat together in the quiet Wyoming night, Sarah slumbering peacefully between them, Eliza felt a profound sense of rightness settle over her. This unlikely family, born of desperate circumstances, had become her greatest joy. The ranch hands noticed the change in their employer. The formidable Wyatt Blackwood, once known for his exacting standards and minimal conversation, now occasionally smiled. He listened with genuine interest to Thomas's endless questions about cattle breeding. He spent Sunday afternoons teaching William to track and shoot, the boy's marksmanship improving weekly under his patient instruction. Most remarkably, he could be seen carrying Sarah on his shoulders as he inspected fences, her delighted giggles. "Floating across the pastures. Never thought I'd see the day," Jackson, the senior ranch hand, remarked to Eliza one afternoon as they watched Wyatt demonstrate roping techniques to an attentive William. "Boss was always fair, always decent, but never happy," Eliza suggested when he hesitated. Jackson nodded. "That's it exactly, Mom. Man worked himself nearly to death all those years, building this place. Never seemed to take any joy in it until you and the children came." The observation warmed her. We needed each other, I think, more than either of us realized. August brought the county fair to Carson City, an event the children had anticipated for weeks. Dressed in their Sunday best, they piled into the wagon, excitement making them unusually cooperative about clean faces and combed hair. The fairgrounds bustled with activity, livestock competitions, handicraft displays, food vendors, and games of skill. Thomas immediately headed for the book auction, while Sarah begged to see the baby animals in the livestock tent. William, growing more confident by the day, asked permission to enter the junior marksmanship contest. "Are you sure?" Eliza asked, concerned. "The competition will be stiff." "Wyatt's been teaching me," the boy replied with quiet determination. "Said I've got a natural eye." Wyatt nodded his agreement. "He does. Best I've seen in someone his age." The simple praise brought a flush of pride to William's cheeks. "I'd like to try if it's all right." "Then you shall," Eliza decided, touched by her son's newfound confidence. As William registered for the competition, Sarah tugged insistently at Wyatt's sleeve. "Papa, look! Ponies!" The title, Papa, had emerged naturally over the summer months, first from Sarah, then tentatively from Thomas. William still called him Wyatt, but the respect in his tone carried the same weight as any formal address. Wyatt lifted Sarah onto his shoulders for a better view of the Shetland ponies being shown nearby. "See that dappled one? Reminds me of the first pony I ever rode, back when I was not much bigger than you." "Really?" Sarah's eyes widened at this glimpse into his childhood. "Did you have your own pony? Did you have your own pony? Did